What great things can't we have anymore because of, well, idiots? Years ago, Long John Silver's would donate their excess food to a local shelter. Then, one idiot tried to get rich by suing the chain, saying that the donated food was tampered with, even alleging it was deliberately poisoned to kill the homeless population. The case went nowhere, but it made all of the local restaurants hesitant to donate, and now none of them donate any food at all. This hit all of the convention centers and large event spaces. We have to throw away so much food now, even if it's individually packaged. My high school used to do a big breakfast buffet for graduating seniors on the last day of school. Bacon, eggs, pancakes, sausage, fruits, pastries, cereal, grits, oatmeal, juice, coffee, basically anything you could imagine. And they'd let you miss your first period class to hang out in the cafeteria for it. It was a big deal that everyone looked forward to. The whole school would smell awesome, and all the other students would be seething with envy in their first period classes. Well, my junior year, the graduating class ahead of me decided to stage a massive food fight. There were grits on the ceiling well into the following year, and of course the principal was so angry my class didn't get a senior breakfast. I'm still bitter to this very day. Public toilets. Public toilets teach you that a lot of humans have not mastered pooping and not having it spray all over the walls, and that lots of people like to do the deed in public toilets. I'm in so much disbelief because on the one hand, people can't wipe their own butts, but on the other they can drive 80 miles per hour in organized lanes, 3 times a day, every day for years, and not get into an accident once. While sober, anyway. You should watch the YouTube video of East Asia 4-way streets with scooters. It's insane. It looks like clusters of bees and nobody's hitting each other. Effective over-the-counter medications. When I was in college, NyQuil could knock you out and give you a solid 10 hours of sleep. You'd definitely feel better in the morning. Now, it does nothing. A few losers in the senior class before us took beer and booze on their senior trip, hiding it in shampoo containers in their luggage. They got drunk and got found out, and all senior school trips were cancelled, starting with ours, the class of '83. Thanks, buttholes of '82. There's going to be a few people who get absolutely wrecked by the senior year before them, I reckon. Our one was that the seniors were the only year not obligated to wear uniforms. Then a bunch of them had to go do a robbery and get caught. So my year were the first ones who had to wear uniforms again to help people identify us if we decided to do after-school crimes or something. Thanks, guys. I've got a really specific one. I went to see the Godzilla head up close on top of a hotel in Shinjuku, Tokyo. It's been closed indefinitely because some absolute idiots were climbing on it and causing too many safety issues, and one of them eventually fell. So we could only look through a window instead. Lame. Okay, it was still pretty cool, but screw those guys. A lot of the archaeological tourism sites like the Egyptian pyramids and Machu Picchu, people kept taking pieces as mementos. Now they won't even let you get close to a lot of them. The Egyptian government doesn't take care of the pyramids very well. It's crowded with hustlers, littered with garbage, and there's camel crap and pee everywhere. They let you climb on the pyramids unsupervised. You're not supposed to go above 3 steps, but you can very easily pay off the guards. It's very common in Egypt. Getting paid off is seen as a common benefit of security jobs. So yeah, tons of graffiti of people scratching their names onto the stones. Oh, what's that? Too out of shape to climb up? Don't worry, they've carved smaller steps into the pyramid for you. Yep, they actually carved into the frickin' ancient pyramids of Giza for the convenience of tourists. Don't let me get started on some of the restoration jobs at other archaeological sites. At Alexandria, they straight up painted over faded pigments. So instead of seeing the authentic remains of pigmented hieroglyphics aged thousands of years, you can see what would happen if a 3rd grader went unsupervised with acrylic paint. So you want to know what a minority of idiots really ruined for everyone else? The remains of ancient Egypt. Leave it to a brain-dead, corrupt dictatorship to vandalize ancient monuments that were otherwise practically untouched since the existence of the frickin' mammoths. In Japan, a couple of teenage hooligans went to a kaiten sushi chain, conveyor belt sushi, and started licking the sushi and condiments while leaving them on the conveyor belt, all the while filming this for TikTok. Now half of all the Kitsunzushi sushi chains have outright stopped having the sushi on the conveyor belt to be taken. You have to order it for it to arrive. The whole joy of kaiten sushi is to take it as it comes, so this is massively disappointing. This is personal and anecdotal, but in my hometown there was a loading dock, some ledges, and a couple of concrete pads behind a Kohl's or Marshall's. Basically skate heaven, and the manager of the store would let local kids skate back there so long as they didn't scare off customers, weren't drinking or doing substances and stuff. So one day, a couple of these idiots vandalized the spot and did a bunch of property damage, and after that, nobody could skate back there. We had the BMX version of that in my town. We built a bunch of dirt jumps, and nobody cared as long as we didn't leave trash or make a bunch of noise. A few years later, some kid broke his arm and mom sued, so the city bulldozed everything. I'm an industrial painter. The factory I'm painting in right now has Wi-Fi, but some idiot downloaded 2 seasons of Supernatural on the company Wi-Fi, and now nobody can have the password. In my hometown, KFC would give the cops the day's leftovers, which encouraged the cops to have at least one cop car in their parking lot when they closed and they were taking the day's take to the bank. Another business complained, jealousy probably, and no more free chicken nor a cop car in their parking lot at closing. When I was growing up, the electric company would offer free light bulbs to customers. A local business complained that he wasn't selling any bulbs as a result, so no more free bulbs for anyone. Detroit Edison did that when I was a kid, and yeah, screw that guy who brought the suit. They even fixed things like toasters at the same place. Where I used to live, there was a public park with a big hill, and when it snowed, people would sled down it. A kid ran into a pole and had to get stitches, and his mum tried to sue the city. Now it's against the law to sled down the big hill. We had a park with a pond that had no swimming signs, and a teenager just decided to swim in it. He drowned, the parents sued, and so they emptied the pond, and now it's just an empty pit of nothing like on Parks and Rec. We have people in my town complaining that the previously unused tennis courts are seeing more use due to the popularity of pickleball, and they're actively campaigning against spending the money to repair the courts at another park in town. They're trying pretty hard to ruin it, but there's a lot of pushback. I don't play, but I support people using our parks. Going unsupervised to amusement parks as a kid or teenager. Here in Southern California, knots used to allow teenagers and kids to come and hang out as they pleased. I myself have tons of my best memories going to knots with my friends. Literally had my first kiss at knots. But because of TikTok and a handful of idiot teenagers starting fights and mass panic over non-existent mass attackers, literally some of these TikTok videos are just kids yelling that there's an armed shooter as a joke. So now if you're under 21, you have to have a chaperone looking after you. Honestly, I feel bad for the kids who were fine and now just can't hang with friends and ride roller coasters. If my nephew or nieces want to go, I or another family member has to agree to chaperone them. I don't know, I just think that sucks. My city has a cool waterfall that people were going down to see for decades. Then a couple of old people who should never have been trying to descend to the bottom fell and hurt themselves. Now it's a 10 grand fine for anyone who tries to go to the foot of the waterfall. Same near me. We had some great swimming holes. A teen doing a bit fell in front of it and died. So the government said we're thinking of closing it. This caused a rush of people, and another teen repeating the bit fell off and died too. Now the whole thing has a massive barrier and a fence because the government closed it. Natural culture is dying bit by bit. Airport security. Used to be so easy. You know, the narrator is making this video the day after a video centered on or around the September 11th attack, and so this feels particularly relevant. But wait, there's a follow-up comment.
And the frickin' shoe bomb guy. Shoe bomb guy is the reason we have to take our shoes off, and that's both a special level of irritating and demonstrably doesn't make us feel more safe. One guy with a half-assed shoe bomb, and now I have to make sure I wear nice socks to the airport every goddamn time. Taking off shoes is mildly less infuriating than not being able to take liquids through security, though. People filming themselves licking soy sauce bottles, putting them back, and being little brats in general basically wiped out the concept of running sushis in Japan. It's steered to an order basis only, and it's just not the same. In most of the world, street parties and carnivals. Vancouver just had a Filipino festival where a mentally unwell person drove into the middle of it and ended 11 people. One single idiot ruined the relaxed dress code we pushed for at work. Normally, the company required a blue or grey suit with tie every day. I worked in the creative department, and it took a long time to convince the powers that be to let us wear khakis and a button-up with no tie to feel a little more relaxed and creative. Part of this deal was that we actually had to access the building via the back door and weren't allowed in main client-facing areas. New guy gets hired, and his first Friday, knowing full well the dress code, he wears a ripped hoodie and jeans. That Monday, we were all back to full suits. Screw that guy. What the frick is your job that it requires that kind of dress code so strongly? For a creative department, no less.
consulting for the military, where most, if not all, of the senior management were retired military, and that's how they liked it. I got reprimanded once for speaking to the CEO of a client because I was some peon who shouldn't speak to anyone. Little did they know I knew the CEO personally through my parents, and we were discussing dinner plans. My boss tried to invite his way into the dinner, but said CEO shot him down, saying it was a personal visit only. That career is long gone, but it's still a funny memory.
I mean, what didn't a minority of idiots ruin for everyone else?
My town had a local pizza place that the Barstool sports guy tried to dox. He had his fans flood their page with negative reviews, but the community got behind it and it became more popular than ever.
Thrifting. It used to be a place to find reasonably priced items. Now too many people use it as a way to flip items.
Every time I go to my local thrift stores, it's 90% stuff from Shine that probably got donated after being worn twice. Which is better than going in the trash, I guess, but it's so hard to find anything older or of decent quality because every other shirt is cheap garbage. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Living in close quarters or using public spaces. Most people are fine, but there's always someone playing loud music with no headphones on the bus or subway, a jerk littering in public parks or putting their half-empty coffee cup on the store shelf and walking away. It wasn't too heavy to carry around when you wanted to sip at it, but now, just gonna leave it right here where it doesn't belong and can spill on someone for the help to pick up. The idiot who lets their dogs run around off-leash and out of control, but yells it's okay, he's friendly. Friendly, but muddy and jumping, and I'm not trusting your judgment. You've already shown it to be poor. Maybe I'm not friendly, or the dog I'm trying to train isn't either. Idiots just ruin everything. At my work, if one person screws up, the whole office pays for it, instead of just reprimanding that one person. It sucks and it's stupid. Why am I getting into trouble for something I haven't done wrong? We call them the cavemen in my town. Citizens against virtually everything. Pseudoephedrine. I just want a good decongestant. But Crystal Labs use that stuff, so now I have to ask for it and it only comes in packs of 12. I'm just trying to unstuff my ears after a cold. REI's return policy. Thieves and scammers at retail stores. More and more stuff is being locked up and you have to jump through hoops to return a broken product. At my work, we had a team of individuals who'd take turns stealing as much laundry detergent as they could and hauling it out the nearest fire exit with them. We eventually locked up all the laundry stuff, and one of the thieves had the big brass pair to come back to the store a week later to complain about how inconvenient this was.
Remember how measles was gone and tuberculosis was on the way out?
Yep, I'm 59 and I just had my immunity checked this week. I have none. Now I have to get a stupid measles booster. Frickin' idiots, there's a special place in heck for Andrew Wakefield. Every single fandom subreddit eventually gets taken over by a small contingent of toxic fans or trolls, driving out anyone wanting to have a normal discussion just by attrition alone. Video game, movie, show, book, it doesn't matter. Eventually it just turns into this hate echo chamber over the smallest BS, and people have to create separate subreddits just to share normal opinions that aren't regurgitated hate.
It's not just fandoms, it's basically the life cycle of every subreddit. 1. Sub is created. Normal people with interest in the topic join it. 2. The sub grows and more terminally online people start to join because they, quote, found their people. 3. The terminally online folks post or comment or upvote or downvote most frequently and start to drown out the normal ones. 4. Normal people start to realize the sub is going down the drain and they leave because they don't want to spend all day arguing like the terminally online ones. 5. The terminally onlines now drive the sub. They think they represent the community as a whole. They sit around reinforcing their own insanity. 6. A new sub is split off for the normal folks who no longer want to be involved in the original sub. And 7. Repeat.
Well, I started thinking about The Last of Us at the start, but then by the end I was feeling it on a personal level as a Critical Role and Star Wars fan. I would have sworn that nobody seemed to hate their properties as much as these, quote, fans. But this last post would suggest that it happens with literally everything. Vending machines in schools. They used to be in the common areas, end of a hallway, strategically placed outside near eating areas, obviously in the cafeteria as well. They weren't all super junky food, there was some nice bagged salads and healthier drinks than sodas. Our school specifically had ginger tea, honey lemon iced tea, and hibiscus tea. Then some kid in our school decided to blow over $500 on just the sodas one week. His parents complained about how easy it was for the children to rot their teeth with the vending machines. Our school had them all removed, doubly incentivized by the fact a school nutrition policy change would be active soon. They were gone by the end of the following week. F you, Jeremy.
Most children don't have parents who give them $500 for sodas, ma'am.
You touched on part of our counter-argument. Why did Jeremy just have $500 in cash to blow? Sounds like a different problem entirely. In the town where I grew up, there was an epic playground that was made out of wood. Quality craftsmanship and a lot of thought went into crafting it. My dad and his carpenter friend were in the paper in a story about the building of it. 15 years later, some Karen's idiot son broke his arm falling from a part of the structure. She created a petition which led to the playground being dismantled. They put up a multicolored metal piece of crap in its place, didn't solve anything, and broke a lot of people's hearts.
They replaced the play equipment at a preschool I worked in. In the 3 years I'd worked there, we'd never had more than a scraped knee. From what I'd been told, there was never a single broken bone. They replaced it with, quote, safer equipment just because they decided they should. There'd been no incident or injury to cause them to change anything. There was bleeding and bruises and concussions aplenty within the first few days, and a broken bone within the first month of use. Collecting as a hobby. I want to collect Pokemon cards because I like the art and I love collecting cards of my favorites. Scalpers have completely ruined it. The Pokemon scalpers have gotten out of control. It's really telling that even the local gaming stores in my area can't get cards in. Apparently the scalpers hit the online shops so hard that retailers just aren't getting shipments. That's some serious bull, and don't get me started on the Warhammer scalpers. Ugh. The last new release sold out in 30 seconds thanks to the scalper bots. Pitchers of milk left on a sideboard cabinet at a coffee shop so customers can top up. Stingy miser buttholes kept using way too much of it, purposefully ordering drinks without milk and then adding it for free. So most places have done away with them and now we need to ask for more when we need it. Thanks, tightwads. Yep, along similar lines, there's a really nice waffle shop where I live in the UK, and their whole thing is authentic maple syrup. They used to have pictures of the stuff on every table, the idea being that people could add as much or as little as they wanted. The problem wasn't your standard everyday greed of pouring a wasteful amount of sauce on, that was almost kind of the point anyway. People could have as much as they wanted within reason. The refills were often queried. If plates were swimming with syrup and they asked a waitress for more, they'd get challenged on it. The problem was literal theft. People stealing whole pitchers of maple syrup to take home. As if authentic maple syrup isn't expensive enough, replacing the pitchers themselves too was just too much. Now, a standard meager amount per dish, and if you want more you have to ask and pay for it, all because some selfish bunts had to steal stuff. In Sweden, some idiot family let their young daughter play freely in a graveyard, including climbing very old graves, one of which fell and unfortunately killed her. This resulted in government starting a project to secure all gravestones nationwide. All registered grave owners had to pay for this. Cost me €3,000. Social media gave idiots a platform and a megaphone. Almost everything following the invention and proliferation of social media has been ruined by our lowest common denominator. Politics, religion, government, truth, critical thinking, friendship, love, mental health, TV, film, vacations, work-life balance. If there's an app for it, then idiots have ruined it, period. Housing. A relatively small amount of people treating housing as a commodity has effectively doubled the cost of all types of housing. Subway immediately stopped giving sub-stamps and scrapped the whole program just because one dude stole a roll of stamps. Bad dog owners. The ones who don't clean up after their doggos. The ones who let their dogs destroy rental properties. The ones that let their dogs bark. The ones that don't train them. Dogs get banned from so many places because of bad dog owners, and when people like me, who pick up after their dogs, train them, control them, etc., can't take their dogs to certain parks, or when I was young I had trouble finding places to rent because of people who didn't train their dogs. Nuanced political discourse. A minority of bad faith actors turned every conversation into a shouting match where you're either all in or completely against. Now, thoughtful middle ground takes get drowned out and people are too afraid to speak honestly without being labeled or attacked. We lost the ability to disagree without dehumanizing each other. The most important rule I have for my team is that I won't micromanage as long as the work gets done. Despite an already relaxed work environment, there are still those that try to push the boundaries. I ask only that everyone be on point when the higher-ups are around. If you're not busy, at least look busy for frick's sake.
Because of goofing off, this led to the entire team getting their hours cut. They had a good thing and someone had to ruin it for everyone. Oh boy, we see a lot of posts from people complaining about micromanaging managers who ruin everything. Well, I generally agree with that position, but here's what happens when you don't appreciate having one of the good ones. Sucks for everyone when you lose that perk. Air travel. Flying used to be a whole experience. People wore suits, you got real meals, there was legroom. Families could walk all the way to the gate and hug you like it was a damn movie. You could even show up last minute with no ID and still catch your flight. Just pull up with a bag and vibes. That was real. Then a small group of lunatics thought hijacking planes was the move. In the 70s, they were jacking planes almost every other week. That's when they started throwing in metal detectors and bag scans. Then Lockerbie happened, then September 11th came and flipped the whole game. Now we're all there barefoot, damn near in the buck, tossing $20 lotion and hoping the TSA dude doesn't hit us with the extra pat down. It only took a few psychos to ruin flying forever. All we wanted to do was enjoy the peanuts in peace. Starting this year, I'm not allowed to have a propane grill because I live in an apartment. About 20 years ago, they banned charcoal. At least with that, I guess you had a literal pile of smoldering rocks for an hour after you were done that could pose a risk, but I miss charcoal burgers at home. The insult of, you're allowed to have a grill but it has to be electric? Motherfrickers, that's a George Foreman on a stand. The original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie sequels. The first movie was incredible, but too many parents complained about the movie being too dark and violent for kids. It isn't. So we got two terrible, slapstick, nonsensical sequels, and no Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie since has ever come close to matching the first one.
Military personnel of Reddit. What's the best, weirdest, or funniest punishment you've seen handed down by a superior? USMC boot. One kid on Firewatch failed to notice the DI coming on deck, which means you immediately salute and report your post. So the DI ran up to the rifle rack, smacked it, and yelled, "Bam! You're dead." He tried to respond, but was cut off by the DI. "You're a ghost now. You can't talk. Go act like a ghost." Then the kid had to wander around the squad bay for the rest of his 2-hour Firewatch acting like a ghost, and he took that responsibility with stride. Plenty of ridiculous, "Ooh, I'm a ghost" noises and screwing with people's racks. We were all laughing our butts off for the next hour till our senior got mad. Here's another one that happened to me. An SDI from the squad bay above us told us that whenever he comes on deck and we call the greeting, we all have to squat until he tells us to get up. So we do. Now, one day, I'm out doing gear guard with a buddy. Apparently, the SDI came on deck and told everyone to stop squatting. Coming back from gear guard, I didn't know that. He comes on deck, I squat, and no one else is. I look around. I crack a smile, and that was the oh crap moment. Though, instead of just getting smoked, he told me he wanted me to sing. Side straddle hops and mountain climbers, Marine Corps push-ups, double timers. While doing the exercises I was singing. The tune, the wheels on the bus go round and round. So it goes into the duty hut and I start. At first I was quiet and wasn't into it, but I decided, screw it, let's go for it. So for the next 20 minutes, approximately, I was belching out wheels on the bus go round and round with those lyrics as loud as I could sing it while doing those exercises. The rest of my platoon was cleaning rifles. Everyone freaking lost it after a few minutes, even the DIs. All three of them covered their faces and just stood there laughing. It was amazing, and a really, really good workout. I was exhausted. Marine Boot Camp. We had a guy that somehow got his watch through the in-dock. They take all your crap when you first get there. Well, the DIs found out he had it when they saw him wearing it one day, so they put him in the squad bay trash can and put the lid on it. Every time they walked by and kicked it, he'd pop out with his watch and yell, "Sir, the time on deck is 09:45!" And then go back into his can like the freaking Grouch from Sesame Street. It was really, really hard not to laugh at that. During my first deployment to Iraq as a 50 cal gunner, I had a salty sergeant for a team leader. Dude had been at the tip of the spear for the Iraq invasion, been to Baghdad in 2005, and now he was back for his third time in 2007. Not only was he intimidating, but he knew how to discipline your butt if you stepped out of line. I was a stupid, young, private first class with about a year in the Army. I knew what was right and what was wrong, and thankfully, was able to get on his good side. Our driver though, nuh-uh. He was a short, stupid specialist with a crustache who recently did 4 years in Korea. This dude was so off, he even re-enlisted for it when his first stint was over. Dude was just freaking weird and gross. Always had an excuse for everything, nothing was ever his fault. He loved trying to pass the blame down my way, mostly because he outranked me. Our sergeant normally knew what was up and corrected him accordingly. Well, during a convoy security mission one day in southern Iraq, he hit a pothole. Like, a big one. Probably 20 foot long by 20 foot wide. Our sergeant flips out, asking what the heck he was doing. The driver tries blaming it on me, saying I never let him know it was there. Since I was the gunner, I had to make everything aware to him because I was the eyes and ears. The sergeant chews him out, saying it was the driver's fault he didn't avoid the pothole since I was up top scanning for threats. We were the lead vehicle, so it's not like this pothole was obscured by anything, especially since it was in broad daylight. The driver then starts saying, "I don't know, Sergeant. I couldn't see it because I'm short." He wasn't that short. Guy was maybe 5'7", give or take an inch. He wasn't paying attention, and that's what the sergeant wanted to hear, because it was the truth. Well, this irritates the heck out of our sergeant, and he calls for the entire convoy, something like 20 semis, 6 Humvees, and 2 M111-7 ASVs, to halt. He then tells me to pass down an empty 50 caliber can. I do so with a quickness. The sergeant then passes the can to the driver and makes him use it as a booster seat. The driver protests, then my sergeant gives him a direct order to do so. The driver backs down and does it. At every gate to every base we approached, my sergeant made the driver open the door and show every guard what he was sitting on. Then he was forced to sing, "I'm a little teapot, me, oh my, I sit on a high chair so we don't blow up and die." Most of the guards just laughed their butts off. A few radioed for other guards to come see it. He was the laughingstock of our battalion for months. A recruit in USMC boot camp thought he was special because he was an Eagle Scout. The drill instructor picked up on this, and during PT, took him into the woods and made him build a nest. Then, he had to squat over it in order to keep his eggs warm. When we were heading to Iraq, we had to pass through Kuwait. Kuwait, being the transient hub for soldiers heading to and leaving Iraq, it is very chaotic. As a result of jet lag and the chaotic nature of Kuwait, my buddy had brought his weapon to the shower, but forgot to grab it on his way back to the tent. Shortly after he left, a sergeant came bursting through the door to see him sitting on his cot, messing around with his new video camera he had just purchased to bring on the deployment. His punishment was to get up, take his weapon and camera, and go sit in the community shower area and make sure no one else leaves their weapon in the shower for the night. So, what would you see when you went to take off your clothes to get in the shower was a fully dressed guy with a video camera just sitting there looking at you. There was a time when we made a private sweep all the sunshine off the sidewalks. It took the poor guy all day. One of the first days in basic, a guy in my platoon was standing at attention while having his room inspected by the instructor. It didn't matter how nice his room was, because there was a large piece of fuzz/fluff on his shirt that immediately drew the sergeant's attention. Imagine a female French-Canadian sergeant with this accent. "Recruit Bloggins, what is that on your shirt? Is it a fluffy?" "Yes, Sergeant. Why is there a fluffy on your shirt, Bloggins? I must have missed it, Sergeant. Missed it? It is so huge. How did you miss such a big fluffy?" She picks it off of him. "Hold out your hand." He holds out his hand and she places it in his palm. "This is Mr. Fluffy. Find a home for him, like a pill bottle or something. From now on, whenever I want to see Mr. Fluffy, you must bring him to me." And so, for the rest of basic, every time the sergeant found a piece of fuzz, she would yell out, "Mr. Fluffy!" And Bloggins would have to march over to her and present Mr. Fluffy, and she would formally hand him the new piece of fuzz to add to Mr. Fluffy. There was heck to pay if he didn't have Mr. Fluffy with him at all times. Week 1 in Army basic training, we had a soldier ask for an omelet in chow line, which was not allowed because there was absolutely no time to make custom omelets for every single basic training soldier. The cook started making the omelet when a drill sergeant asked what the heck was going on. The basic training soldier replied, "Go around, drill sergeant, I'm waiting on an omelet." Needless to say, this was the wrong thing to say and do week 1 in basic training. Our platoon motto was henceforth, "Go around, drill sergeant, I'm waiting on an omelet." And the basic training soldier was henceforth named Private Omelet. In the Marine Corps, when we really screwed up, we would go, quote, fishing. It is where you squat down like you're sitting in a chair and hold a shovel out in front of you in the air like a fishing pole. Then, you just sit there for a long time, and if the shovel would start to droop down, my sergeant would grab the tip of the shovel and start to shake it and make me pretend I was reeling in the big one. One time, me and a buddy got in trouble together, so they made him fish and me flop around on the deck like a fish he had already caught for almost an hour. Now jump on the deck and flop like a fish! SpongeBob SquarePants! We were deployed in Iraq, and a guy was peeing in water bottles instead of walking to the bathroom at night. This is a common thing, but this guy wasn't getting rid of the bottles. He'd keep them underneath his cot for some reason. When the first sergeant found this out, he made the guy report to the commander while holding all of his pee bottles in a box in front of him. They tore into this guy while he was holding a box of his own urine. Guy in basic dropped the biggest turd you've ever seen in the commode. So he shows the drill sergeants, who then make him suit up in full combat gear, weapon and all, and guard it all night. The whole, "Halt! Who goes there?" Pretty amusing. Navy basic training. All of us are doing push-ups. When the instructor says down, everyone counts. When the instructor says up, one guy in particular, the screw-up, is told to shout, "Would you like fries with that?" The instructor told him to get used to it because that's what he's going to be saying for the rest of his life. Down. 1. Up. Would you like fries with that? Down. 2. Up. Would you like fries with that? There was a pool of tears from laughter on the floor below me. I wrote a bad check while stationed in Korea. $2.06 over the limit. My punishment? To cut the parade field grass with scissors by morning. Had to cut the PT field with scissors along with 3 other guys because while we were buffing the floors, one of them somehow managed to get a candy bar and it fell out of his pocket in front of a drill. Everyone just froze and stared at the Snickers. It's like seeing a bus come at you in slow motion. You can't move, you can't speak, you just watch. Edit: candy is strictly forbidden, along with sodas, snack foods, laptops, phones, etc. Your only belongings are what you are issued minus stationery and, depending on the drills you have, photos. For 3 or 4 months, you only eat what they feed you and you only do what they tell you. The food though? Good lord, the food. Breakfast was freaking awesome, and dinner was usually extremely filling. You didn't go hungry at all. Since you signed on that dotted line, you signed away all privileges for 3 months. I was in a gender-mixed company in basic. The 3rd floor of the barracks was split with females on one half and males on the other. Males were not allowed in the female half and vice versa. My platoon was out back practicing throwing grenade bodies, and a window on the female side of the 3rd floor opened, and a male sneaked out of the window onto the ledge. It was immediately obvious to everyone, including our drill sergeant, that he had been in there messing around with the female, and a drill sergeant must have come down the hall, forcing him to get out onto the ledge so he wouldn't get caught. Our drill sergeant looked at the guy for a minute and then yelled, really sarcastically, "Don't do it, Private, you have lots to live for." Then they put him on self-unalive watch and made him hand over his belts and tie and shoelaces and everything that he could hang himself with and made him drag his newly bare mattress out into the hallway next to the fire guard desk and sleep out there every night until we graduated 4 weeks later. And they made his battle buddy sleep on the floor next to him for the first week. TLDR, male caught messing around with female, treated like potential self-unalive for remaining month of BCT. Officers can't punish soldiers with any punishment that doesn't follow guidelines. That said, they could be ordered some stupid things. My friend got ordered to move a box weighing about 50 pounds from the barracks to the shower every 2 minutes for 2 hours. The officer's reason for it was because he didn't know where to put it and was trying to decide if it should be at the barracks or the shower. In the end, he ended up telling him to load it up in the truck. Having to apply suntan lotion to a crap ton of large rocks so they, quote, don't get sunburned, then having to flip every rock and reapply as needed. I once spent 12 hours cleaning screens on windows. That doesn't sound bad, does it? Try this. Find a small wire about the same gauge as the holes in your window screen. Gently push the wire through the hole in the screen to make sure that the hole is empty. Repeat for 3 minutes, then look away from the screen. Anything weird with your eyes? Try it for hours. Had a guy in a warehouse drop a pallet load of assorted nuts and bolts off a forklift. Boxes broke open, 100,000 little nuts and bolts everywhere of various sizes. He had to sweep them into a pile, repair the boxes, fit each nut to a screw to make sure of the size. The pile was then inspected, then he had to remove each nut from the screw and place the screw in the proper box, then place the nut in the proper box. Probably 25 or 50 per box, I don't remember. Doesn't sound too bad, right? Took 3 12-hour days. He wasn't allowed to sit down. He had to bend over at the waist, pick up a tiny nut and screw, straighten up, screw them together, then bend over for another. More than 100,000 times. Think about it. During an inspection and basic training, a piece of lint was found in our dryer. I ordered to, quote, handcuff the intruder and construct a detention facility where the intruder could be interrogated. I was to have an in-depth report on who he was, where he was from, and what he was doing in the building. My grandfather, who was a Korea veteran, had a story about a guy who kept getting things taken away from him as punishment. Apparently, before it was over, he had no socks or shoelaces, no underwear, and they took the inside part of his helmet. My brother told me that when he was in basic, a drill sergeant yelled at this guy to, quote, beat his face, meaning to do push-ups. Said guy had no clue it meant that, and promptly punched himself in the face really, really hard and fell to the ground. The drill sergeant had to walk that one off, and my brother said you could hear him laughing hysterically as he walked behind a building. Not totally relevant, but I figured I'd share. Drill was smoking us one morning, and one of the other boots kept making karate sounds on the up on the push-ups. Drill was down with us, so he'd shout, down, hold it, to the left, and up, and you'd hear, hi-ya, in a long, low, guttural grunt. Eventually, everyone is laughing, including the drill, at the up sounds. Finally, he collapses in a fit of giggles and shouts, I hate all you suckers. Then he walks over to the other drill, who was snickering, and says, I quit. I can't smoke these suckers if they make me laugh. Didn't see him until after chow. Another from basic was, a private was caught walking to the showers without wearing his clothes, just holding his towel and walking nude. The showers were in the same bay, and it was just males in the bay, but a female drill from another platoon came in and saw him and made him drop and give 50 push-ups while nude. A buddy of mine had a DI that would make anyone who did anything stupid chug a smart water, quote, in case it helps. A guy I worked with had a habit of falling asleep at his desk. He was a real scumbag. Unfortunately, he was also a 1-star general's son. They made him sit at his desk with one of those exercise yoga ball things. The sucker still fell asleep, but he would hit his head on the desk or fall over. He also decided to tell his supervisor he had an appointment, but instead took a nap in his room. They called the cops on him and had him arrested for dereliction of duty. Fun stuff. Got caught in basic with my iPod, and I ran around the camp for near 2 hours with my iPod over my head, shouting, I'm a stupid jerk for bringing my iPod in the field, as the, quote, enemy was attacking our camp. I then proceeded to put my iPod in a plastic bag, then taped it onto my helmet, and from there on, I responded to Private iPod. When my instructor shouted play, I had to sing, skip, I had to switch songs, etc. It lasted 2 weeks, even during the night when I had 1 to 2 hours to sleep. Throwaway to protect the innocent. I was once in the Navy, stationed at Kings Bay, a Navy submarine and training base in rural southern Georgia, USA. A stone's throw away from Florida. Due to this base may or may not contain nuclear weapons, there is a Marine Security Detachment/Battalion/something stationed there as well. The majority of these poor sods were just out of Marine kill camp and were hot and heavy to go off to Middle Eastistan and, quote, shoot them some towel heads. Unfortunately, they'd landed themselves in a swamp in rural southern Georgia. Needless to say, they typically made very poor choices. Their superiors, however, normally disciplined them well. Amongst the punishments I witnessed were the following. Number 1. A group of Marines had decided to play soccer with an armadillo, killing it. They were forced to perform a full military funeral for the poor creature, then stand honor guard at its grave for a week, 24/7, in full dress uniform. In the middle of the summer. Remember, this is in a swamp in southern Georgia. Number 2. I happened to be out early one Sunday morning, chain smoking and drinking coffee outside of the Navy barracks, when an interesting sight came by. There were 13 Marines. 12 of them were running and carrying a telephone pole on their shoulders, 6 in front, 6 in back. The 13th man was in the middle of the pole, hanging from it, doing pull-ups, as the telephone pole was being carried by the other 12 running Marines. After a certain number of pull-ups, he would swap with one of the carriers. Number 3. Speaking of, this base may or may not contain nuclear weapons. The Marines had to do regular patrols, driving slowly around in Humvees or armored cars around the storage bunkers and the base at large. Apparently, there was a problem with the Marines in the vehicles falling asleep and running off the road. A brilliant NCO had the following great idea. Only one Marine would be in the vehicle, whilst the other Marine would be running behind it. If the vehicle were to start swaying off the road, the runner would awaken his driver comrade and they'd swap. It didn't take long, however, for this plan to fail. Patrol vehicle went off the road, crashed, and the Marine running stayed the course, smacking into the back of the vehicle and rendering himself unconscious. Some idiot gun bunny didn't check pressures before they took their piece out onto the field. Instead of being smart and zipping his lip, he said something stupid to the master gunny about the cooler temperatures causing the pressure to drop. For 13 hours the next day, he had to deflate every tire on every artillery piece, refill them to spec with a hand pump, and if anyone asked him what the heck he was doing, he had to yell, "I am replacing the summer air in the tires with fresh winter air!"
Redditors who have caught their significant other cheating, how did you catch them? Did you give them another chance? We went to a Halloween party at a friend's place. I'd known she's had a bit of a crush on one guy who was to attend. At one point late in the night, she was quite drunk. She lined up at the washroom immediately after he went in. I kept a bit of an eye on her, and when the bathroom door opened, she went in, but he didn't come out. I stood at the door and waited. When it opened and he stumbled out, I immediately went in and confronted her about it. I'm proud of myself for not committing murder that night. We're going through divorce now. 10 years married with 2 kids. Really? You're gonna do it at a mutual friend's party in the bathroom? That's just got bad idea written all over it. I didn't catch him. He called me the next morning crying and told me everything. I respected his honesty, recognized his remorse, and truly believed it would never happen again, so I decided to forgive him. But after he cheated, he became incredibly paranoid. He started checking my phone, accusing me of revenge screwing people behind his back. Even got mad when I was assigned to work with a man on a group project in school. I couldn't stand by the fact that he was the one who'd cheated and I was the one being punished. I really had forgiven him. I wasn't holding his mistake over his head, and my attitude toward him didn't change after the fact at all, but he was driving me away more and more every day. After about a month of this, I broke up with him and he completely lost it. Sounds like this was a hitch in the relationship that you guys just weren't going to get through, one way or the other. I met my future husband when I was 15 years old. By the time I was 20, we were married, and I was pregnant with my first child. At 22, I gave birth to our second child, and that's when things changed. Suddenly, he was never home. He would leave the house to pick up milk and return at 5 a.m. He was drinking so heavily that most mornings he'd wake up in a panic, wondering where he'd left his car, only to find it in the driveway. Luckily, he'd never killed anyone driving home while blackout drunk. My husband had wanted to be a writer, so I would constantly find half-written stories or story outlines in these hardcover journals. He left them everywhere, and I'd pick them up and pile them on his desk. One night, I'm getting ready to host a party for my father's 50th birthday. The hall was already booked and I had already decorated. We were expecting about 80 guests. I was quickly trying to get ready and out the door as I had to be there before guests started arriving, but I could not find my pantyhose anywhere. While rummaging through our dresser drawers, I found them, along with another one of his hardcover journals. I opened it up and scanned a page wondering why this particular book was stashed in a drawer. As I read what was on the pages, my entire world was crashing down on me. Not only was my husband an alcoholic, alcoholic. He also had a pretty serious drug addiction. Then the worst part hit me. He was having an affair with my best friend. She was my maid of honor, my best friend since we were 10 years old. I ran to the washroom and threw up. I just couldn't handle the information I'd just gotten. I quickly finished getting ready and left the house. I hosted that party that night with both my husband and my best friend in attendance, and did so with a smile on my face. It was a tough night, but I survived. We've since gotten divorced, and I no longer have contact with either of them. Yeah, a lot of red flags there, unfortunately. Going out for milk and not coming back till 5 a.m.? I'm sorry, but I'm gonna need some answers. And the worst part is, he was cheating with your best friend. He was my first proper boyfriend, and in hindsight, he was a pretty crappy boyfriend. But at the time, I thought the sun shone out of his butt. So I was crushed when out of the blue, he dumped me, with no reason. A week later, a group of his friends who'd taken a liking to me contacted me with the real reason for our breakup, because apparently they'd seen what was happening and they were sick of his crap. Basically, he'd been seeing another girl behind my back, and when she found out about me, she refused to sleep with him. So he dumped me in the hopes of getting into her pants. She inevitably told him to get lost, at which point he tried getting back with me. I did not take him back. I found out while I was deployed. The guy she was cheating on me with emailed me and told me everything, every detail. He apologized and told me he had no idea we were together. I put a hole in the wall, went to smoke an entire pack at the smoke pit, went back to my laptop, and I thanked the guy. You gotta at least respect the guy for coming to you and letting you know. If he honestly didn't know she was with someone, at least he's doing what he can to try and make it right. My girlfriend was out with a friend, we'll call her Susan, on a girls' night until all hours, and told me she was staying at Susan's place for the night. The next time I see Susan, she pulled me aside and told me that they actually went to the house of a guy my girlfriend worked with. We'll call him Patrick, because that's his name. Susan goes on to tell me that she woke up in the middle of the night and found my girlfriend fooling around with Patrick on the couch, while Patrick's girlfriend was asleep in the bedroom. I thanked her for letting me know, then went home and told my girlfriend to pack her stuff. I kinda hope someone told Patrick's girlfriend too. The whole situation is messed up, but she was in the house. My ex-wife and I were together for 6 years, married for 2.5 of them. She worked in a hospital and started getting a little too buddy-buddy with a doctor. I confronted her about it and she assured me he was just a friend, and tried to make me sound crazy. She even had this idea in that she could convince or trick me into being friends with him so that she could be with him without me being suspicious. I did everything I could to get her to talk to me, but she never would. It's a very long, sad, and messed up tale. Eventually, all her lies started making less and less sense. I found a program that would decipher text messages and picture messages from an iTunes backup of her phone. It had all the evidence I needed. I still can't shake all the texts, images, and general disrespect of our marriage and family that I discovered. We have a 2-year-old together after all. This was a little over a year ago, and I still have serious bouts of depression over it. The day I found out, I texted the picture he had sent of his junk to both him and her. She came home sobbing and trying her best to convince me to try our marriage again. I could never trust her again, nor did I want to try, but for a while, I thought that maybe I should give it a chance. That was a waste of a couple months of my life. She refused to change jobs or stop contacting him, even with the threat of losing her family looming over her head. I made the hardest decision of my life, that it would be better for my daughter to grow up in 2 separate homes where she didn't need to witness her parents constantly fighting her in tears. I share 50-50 custody of her with my ex-wife, which saddens me deeply because I can't see her as much as I want, but it's better than her growing up in a household full of lies and deceit. Throughout the ordeal, I lost 30 pounds from constant stress and depression. I learned that people don't change. Selfish people will always be selfish people. I did, however, receive the amazing gift of a child from it all though, and I would never change that. That's really rough to hear, my friend. That's probably the worst part, is that when that trust is gone, it's almost impossible to get back. And it sounds like your wife wasn't really putting in any work to get there either. I was deployed in Iraq and my wife was being distant for a few weeks. During my deployment, she mentioned several times in phone calls this contractor she was working with and how much they click and all. I trusted her and never thought that she was cheating, but I joked about it and we laughed it off. I even met the guy while home on leave and he shook my hand, thanking me for my service. A month later, I'm back in Iraq, and one particular night I can't get a hold of her. I called and no answer. I'm very much a trust my gut type of guy, and I had a sinking, sickly feeling of something being up. I never was one of checking or sneaking into her accounts, but we shared passwords with each other. I decided to check her Facebook account. There was nothing in her inbox, but there was one lonely message in her outbox she didn't delete to the contractor guy she worked with, saying, "I will always love you." That was when my world came crashing down. Shortly afterwards, she finally calls me back, not knowing I know, and confesses she's pregnant with his baby. I couldn't get a hold of her because she was with her mom confessing what she had done. That night, I remember punching a wall and straining or broke my thumb, and leaving my barracks knocking over a porta potty. Thankfully, nobody was in it. There was a month or two before I was to be home, and we tried working it out being distant. Once I got home, I decided to give it another chance. She told me she would stop talking to him and request him to be removed from her project. I met her at the office one day for lunch, and she wasn't in her office yet. While waiting for her, I saw she had her email pulled up, but not her usual email. Turns out she had a secret email account with him. After that, I was done and out. The one thing some people don't know is that there can be layers to unravel when your significant other is cheating. My doubts started when I took my significant other's phone on accident, unlocked it, and bam, texts that were pretty inappropriate. I confronted her about it and she tried to talk her way out of it, but they were just texts, so I told her to stop doing it and everything would be fine. Unfortunately, I found out in a pretty annoying way. I was chilling at home and I get a message from a really good friend if I wanted to go play laser tag. We're in college and it's what bored college kids do. I decline and just go about my evening. The next day, I'm talking to that exact friend and he lets me know that my significant other and this other guy, the guy that she was sending the text to and that everyone else also knew, were being a little bit too close. I confronted her and bingo, she was cheating on me. Ended soon after that. A surprise visit from out of town. She's not home. Well, it was a surprise and I wasn't sure of her plans for the evening. So I go to my mom's house to wait a while. A few hours later, I go back to my girlfriend's apartment, but she's still not there. On a hunch, I drive by her male friend's place and sure enough, her car is there. I get an uncomfortable feeling about it, but try not to worry. So I go back to my mom's place to get some sleep. Up early, I go over to my girlfriend's again. Not there. Drive around the block and she's still at that dude's place. I never liked that jerk. At this point, I'm angry. I go back to my mom's and call my girlfriend's home phone. The message was something like this: "I came into town last night and we need to talk." A few hours later, she rings the doorbell and we go upstairs. She confesses that she cheated. I was in love with this woman, so I accepted her apology and gave her another chance. We stayed together for a few months, but I came to realize I couldn't forgive her so easily, especially since she was still hanging around that guy. So we broke up. The end. When they're caught and they're not willing to cut off contact with the person that they were caught with, there's definitely going to be problems. They can't seriously expect you to sit there and just be okay with you continuing to spend time with them. I'd been dating a guy for a few months. We didn't have a title on it, but a couple months before the incident, we had decided that we had no interest in seeing others and we were exclusive. He decides he wants to buy an iPad, and a few days later, I asked if I could see it to see what apps he had, and if there were any I might like to put on my own. I noticed an app called MeetMe that has around 5 or 6 notifications on it. I honestly had no idea what it was, so I opened it. It went straight to his inbox, which was full of messages from other women. Just as I saw that, he asked if I was ready to go to the grocery store, so I left it there. He could tell something was up at the grocery store, but I didn't bring it up in public, obviously. We get back to his place and I open up the app again. I said, "What's this app on here called MeetMe? I've never heard of that before." He said, "Oh, it's just a social networking site, kind of like Facebook. It's really big with my friends from up in Oregon. So I open up a message that says something like, "Hey girl, you want to come see me so I can play with those tatas?" Or something along those lines. I said, "Oh, so this blonde girl Shelly is gonna fly all the way from Oregon so you can play with her tatas? How sweet of her." Then we get into a huge fight, with him mostly claiming that I'm not his girlfriend so he can still do things with other girls, seemingly forgetting about the exclusivity talk. It ends with him confessing that he did it because he's in love with me and those strong feelings scared him, so he turned to other women, but he never actually met up with any of them. He also cried, so that was cool. I gave him another chance, but we crashed and burned not too long afterwards because I just couldn't trust that sketchy jerk. That's one of the worst, most popular excuses for cheating I've ever heard. It's just stupid when you think about it. The fact that people think that this is a legitimate excuse just shows how stupid they are. My ex just started grad school after being out of undergrad for about 2 years. We'd been going out for nearly a year. She would introduce me to a lot of her classmates and stuff, and we'd start to hang out with some of them. The people she had made the best friends with were guys, which I didn't have too much of a problem with. Most of them seemed cool. One of the guys she was probably the closest with, and she started talking about this guy all the time. He had just gotten married a couple months prior, I guess. I had met him a few times, and I got just a bit of a jerk vibe from him, but whatever. A couple weeks go by and she just starts to act different. It's our anniversary weekend and I have dinner plans for us. Get a nice card, all that kind of stuff. She has to cancel on me at the last minute because she has to study. That weekend, I stay at her apartment because I need to do something downtown the next day, and I wasn't living around there. She ended up having to go to her parents' house for some reason. She left her laptop and I took it to go on Gmail. Her Gmail was logged in, and I know I really shouldn't have done it, but I started to poke around just a little. I felt terrible while doing it, but I could feel some distance between us and she wouldn't talk to me about whatever it was. She had deleted the majority of her Gchat conversations, but must have overlooked one of them. It was a quite obscene conversation with that married guy about what they had done that weekend and many other times before that. So I took the card I had gotten for her, wrote "F you" all over the words, telling her how I had loved her, and set it on her computer with that conversation still open, and left. That's it? No follow-up? I guess she just came home and found that and put it all together and decided to let it go? My first boyfriend cheated on me with his ex at least twice, but I didn't actually find out until years after we broke up. He and I got together for drinks and to catch up, and I just flat out asked him if he'd slept with her. He couldn't answer me, and that answer was enough. Looking back, I knew in the back of my mind something was up, and I should have accepted that and moved on sooner. The paintings she did of him, the way he'd disappear for days after seeing her, heck, he even drove to my school in her car to tell me we should take a break. Ugh. It makes me angry to think about how naive I was. I was trying to be the cool girlfriend who didn't mind her boyfriend hanging out with his ex because they were just friends. Joke's on me, I guess. My ex-boyfriend and I had been dating for 2 years when he cheated on me. It was his birthday and we were supposed to be going out for dinner that night. I decided to surprise him with his birthday present earlier that day. I went over to his house since he was off from work and saw that he had left the door unlocked. So I went in and called out for him, but he didn't answer. His TV volume was turned up really loud, so I went up to his room just to catch him pile driving my cheer captain. There was no confrontation. I left quietly, though I did come back to stick nails in his tires out of spite. He begged me to forgive him, but I declined. I won't lie, I was tempted, but it really hurt. To give him everything, and I mean everything I could emotionally, and he was my first, for him to turn around and betray me like that really hurt. I will say that holding grudges did me no good. I was able to forgive him just for closure purposes. When it comes to forgiving someone for something like this, that's more what it's for. It's for you. You need to be able to move on, and it's hard to do that when you're still holding on to those feelings. My roommates in college confronted her after they knew she had someone over while I was out of town. She convinced them that she would tell me what had happened. After I returned and 24 hours passed, my roommates told me because they let her have her time. I kicked her out immediately and ended it. About a month later, she moved into the same building, same floor across the hall. Her door was about 8 feet from mine. It's a college town with tens of thousands of apartments. And no, it was not to see me. We talked once after the breakup, and it was truly over. That's incredibly awkward to have to be across the hall from each other after all of that. My wife had been acting distant for a few weeks, and suddenly started meeting a female friend of hers a night a week or so. I was suspicious, especially when the friend called looking for her on a night that they were supposed to be out together. A few nights later, I found some pictures and text messages on her phone. We argued, and I ended up going to my buddy's house at 3 in the morning. God bless him. The next day, we argued some more, and of course it was my fault. After all, I didn't pay her enough attention. We went to counseling, and I stayed because of our kids, but I've never forgiven her, and honestly, I wonder if staying was a mistake. The marriage was rocky once he met a girl in his summer session course and was studying with her while I was gone at work. Sometimes she'd come early in the morning, like 6 a.m., and then be there when I got home at 9 p.m. He would make her breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the groceries I was buying for us with my hard-earned money. I put my foot down and said that he had to limit his time with her, that my needs weren't being met. He was withholding sex for weeks at the time, citing that he was too tired or stressed. He said I was overreacting, that nothing was happening between them, and that I was just trying to sabotage his career goals. I read his chats with her, and he was pouring his heart out about our troubles, but there was no evidence of cheating. I sent him to sleep on the futon the day I came home from work to have lunch and found them boxing in the backyard shirtless. In the following months, I tolerated none of his crap. But what really got me was when I happened upon a pros and cons list comparing me to his ex, his study buddy, and some other girl I hadn't even heard of yet. I also found love letter drafts to 2 girls thrown in the trash, not even hidden. Needless to say, I ended it right quick and kicked him out. I was actually pretty merciful and let him live in the garage for 3 weeks, but he definitely didn't deserve it. Last I heard, he's dating the 3rd girl on the list and living with his study buddy. Jerk. This sounds like it has nothing to do with you and more with him just not knowing what he wants. Sadly, a lot of the times that's the way it goes. It's not the person who got cheated on that has anything wrong with them. It's the person who did the cheating. What's the worst thing you've had or seen done by someone who was supposed to be a professional? Dentists will appreciate this one. My girlfriend at the time was unhappy with the appearance of her teeth, and rather than go with orthodontics, which my very professional dentist had recommended, opted to go the instant solution of crowns and veneers, nearly a dozen in all, suggested by a dentist at some random strip mall. Doing this work required she get 6 root canals. Her appointment for the work was a Friday at about 2 p.m. They worked on her for 3 hours, and when it was 5 p.m., it was quitting time. They stopped work, put a temporary bridge on her, and said they'd see her in 2 weeks, when her next appointment was scheduled, and sent her home. Once the lidocaine wore off, she was in agonizing pain. By Sunday, she literally asked me to kill her. Calls to the dentist service went unreturned. Monday morning, she called and was told the pain was normal and they wouldn't see her earlier. That afternoon, I called my dentist, explained the situation, and brought her in immediately. He gave her some lidocaine, which provided instant relief, and then took the temporary bridge off. Next, he said out loud, "Holy crap," and told his assistant to get the camera and took about 50 pictures. He left and went into his office and then came back, put the temp on, gave her a script for Percocet, and told us to call her dentist again and make an appointment. We did it, and it was scheduled for 7 a.m. the next morning. Apparently, they had started 6 root canals on Friday, but not completed any of them. Just opened the tooth and exposed the nerve, but not actually destroyed it, and left the tooth open with minimal packing and no actual filling. And apparently, they expected my girlfriend to live with that for 2 weeks with no pain meds. I talked to my dentist about it at a later date, and according to him, this was about the single most painful thing a dentist could do to a person. And had they not taken the appointment the next morning, he was going to hand the pics over to the state's ethics review board. That sounds so painful. Thank God you guys were able to get her in to see your dentist quickly. Let this be a fair warning to anyone who's trying to save a buck on their dentist. Had a gynecologist cough straight into my, didn't cover her mouth, didn't turn away, just spread my legs and coughed. My girlfriend's parents saved money on their room addition by hiring a handyman to install the bathroom fixtures instead of a plumber. He mixed up the hot and cold pipes. It's really, really odd to sit on a toilet full of hot water feeling the steam rise on your butt. I'm sure that's weird at first, but I can see how that would grow on you. I had a teacher in college that took points off my essay for misspelling ludicrous. She didn't know it was a real word and thought I was referring to a pop artist. Had a professor lose my final exam. When I emailed him about why I was failing, he said, "Well, you should have been there for the test." After trying to convince him I was and him not believing me, I showed up to his office and demanded he allow me to go through the Scantrons. He threw a pile at me and rolled his eyes, thinking I was using this as a last resort. Nope. Almost 1,200 Scantrons later, I pulled mine out and put it on his desk. I made him run it through the machine as I watched. Granted, I understand that he had a lot of students and sometimes Scantrons get misplaced, but he shouldn't have been so disbelieving and rude over it. The thing is, I'm sure he has lazy people try and pull moves like this all the time, and probably just didn't want to go through 1,200 Scantrons himself. A doctor once prescribed me beta blockers to treat anxiety. On my follow-up appointment, I asked him about one of the side effects. He asked me what drug I was on. I explained it was the one he had prescribed me the week before, and told him the name of it. The dude proceeds to open a book of prescription drug information and tell me I probably shouldn't be taking it because it could be dangerous. I haven't been back. Maybe look into that kind of thing before prescribing the medication. I had wrecked my mountain bike on a South Mountain trail and ripped open my arm pretty good. I also broke 2 rims, cracked my helmet, and blew out my front shock. I was in and out of consciousness on the road to urgent care. Because it was early Sunday morning, the first 2 places we went to were closed, and we ended up at a little clinic. This young doctor, 3 years out of med school, cleaned my wound, pulled all the rock and dirt out of my skin, and then stitched up a large flap of skin that was torn back. He gave me 2 pain pills and told me to have a good day. Well, apparently you aren't supposed to stitch wounds up like that, and are supposed to let them drain or breathe. I went in 2 days later to get more pain pills because my arm hurt so bad it was keeping me up at night. The doctor on staff told me I had to be admitted to a hospital with an ER immediately because my whole arm was infected and it was starting to reach my lungs. I had a massive infection that ended up hospitalizing me for days, and then I had to have a surgery where they removed a good part of my forearm tissue to let it all regrow. I spent more than a month packing and cleaning out a dollar-sized wound as my tissue regrew. Worst experience of my life. Unfortunately, there's always someone who graduated at the bottom of the class. Professional roofer didn't seal the roof off properly at the end of the day. It rained that night and my parents' attic was filled with water. I'm from Spain and my parents are from Spain as well. I speak Spanish without any accent, not even a local accent. I speak like people on national TV. I'm white. There's no reason for anyone to think I'm a foreigner, but I have a French first name followed by the 2 most common Spanish last names. So I had a consultation with a psychologist. She had my medical history before the consultation. The first thing she asked was if I was having a hard time adapting to the country. I told her I'd always lived here, but I had a French name because my mom moved to Switzerland when she was 18 and moved back to Spain to give birth to me, so she was used to French names. So she asked me if my parents were having a hard time adapting to the country. I told her that my parents were Spaniards who had briefly spent time in Switzerland 25 years ago. Then she asked me again if I was finding Spain very different from my home country. At this point, I started getting irritated, but went along with it because I wanted psychiatric treatment, and she was the one who had to refer me. During the 45-minute session, she asked me several times if I was having a hard time adapting, and made numerous references to my status as an immigrant. To this day, I still don't know if she was crazy, on drugs, or just not listening to me. Probably the last option, unfortunately. For a profession that's supposed to be very good listeners, a lot of the times they don't do it so well. A sign language interpreter was working in a classroom. She only had one deaf customer, so instead of doing her work, conveying the message between spoken and sign language, she flirted the entire time with the guy who was sitting next to the deaf student. When I was working for an oil change place, I witnessed the manager of 15 years not put the oil in the car and send it on its way. I was working in the pit at a 2-bay store. While I was changing the diff fluid on another car, waiting for the oil to drain, the manager did this without checking to see if it was ready. I didn't even get to put the plug back in. "What are you doing? It wasn't even ready to put oil in it. The plug is still here." "Oh, I thought you were done." "You didn't even check if I was done." We found out later that he had just started a new hobby and was fired shortly after. My wife went to a professional conference out of town when she was 7 months pregnant with our first child. It was about a 4-hour drive from home, and she was a little concerned, so she asked me to go with her. She didn't consult with her OBGYN. While we were there, her water broke. We went to the local hospital and they said she was going to be bedridden for the next several weeks, so unless we wanted to stay there, we should get in the car and drive like heck back to our hometown. When we got home, we went directly to the hospital and they admitted her. They kept her in a bed with her feet higher than her head and checked her several times a day for infections. Her OBGYN was nowhere to be found. My wife was a registered nurse at the same hospital where she was staying. Her friends, the other nurses, would come by and chat with her frequently. They let her know that the OBGYN was mad at her for leaving town without telling him and complaining to everyone in the hospital about her. After she'd been there for a couple weeks, the OBGYN showed up. I was in the room along with several of her friends. He smelled very strongly of alcohol. He walked up to the bed without saying anything while putting on a glove. He pulled up her gown and jammed his hand in while everyone was standing there. He then made a few incomprehensible sounds and stormed out. We didn't see him again for a couple weeks. The test for infection finally came back positive, so they were going to induce labor. Her OBGYN showed up, and even though the staff doctors said she could deliver normally, her doctor insisted that she needed a C-section. My wife was really disappointed, but we went along with what he said. We later found out he wanted her to have a C-section because he had a tea time that afternoon and didn't want to miss it. I wanted to complain, but he was the head of the department at the hospital, and my wife said there would be repercussions to her job if we did. This guy just sounds like the worst. When he's acting like that, who cares what he says anymore? Just do what you think is right. If you want to listen to the other doctors, then do that. When I was a teenager, I ended up having to have my first root canal at a new dentist because my father had switched insurance plans. Everything started out normal. But after about an hour into the procedure, the dentist told me that she needed to step out for a moment. At that moment, I still had one of those metal filing toothpicks stuck up into my tooth, so she told me not to close my mouth. I sat there with it open for over an hour. Apparently, she had gone off to do a procedure on another patient because my root canal had run over the time she had allotted for it. Surprise, surprise, my tooth had somehow become infected in this time, and I had to wear a temporary crown for a week and not eat anything that wasn't room temperature while I took antibiotics. When I finally got the permanent crown, it ended up being the brightest shade of white they had. I still haven't been able to get my other teeth to match it without professional whitening. It should be mentioned that this lovely dentist was Orly Tights, the lawyer dentist who later went on to become the head of the Obama birther movement. I was a little surprised when I ended up seeing her on CNN. An electrician touching exposed wiring to see if it was on. I should also mention that he only had 3 fingers left on that hand. I once saw a professional fire dancer use a fire whip and accidentally set his own hair on fire. He proceeded to flip the heck out. I'm sure that one is just a hazard of the job. One of my history teachers in high school was a complete jerk. He looked like the villain from Air Bud. Red hair, Charlie Brown bulb of hair in the front with a mustache. He had done things like try to rip my papers apart when I stapled the wrong two together, ripped one in half and made me tape it back together. I completely hated the guy. One day, he brought his daughter to school and she wasn't acting the way he wanted. He locked her in the closet in the classroom. The entire school heard about it. Sounds like Child Protective Services might need to hear about it too. When I was around 14 or 15, we moved into a new apartment and I made a new friend. She was around my age and we hung out all the time. We would walk to the corner store a lot and she would go in the back room for lengths of time as I waited. I always wondered what she would do in the back room, but she would change the subject and I didn't worry too much since she wouldn't get in trouble and she was the only friend I had at the time, considering it was summer and I had just moved. Later, I saw her coming out with a cop. She didn't know I was in the store. When she saw me, she told me everything and told me not to tell anyone. Story is, she'd been sleeping with this cop for the past 3 months. He worked security at the convenience store part-time. He was an actual police officer. I stayed quiet but couldn't believe how someone that was there to protect us was sleeping with a 14 or 15-year-old in the back of a store. Also, how the owners allowed it and looked the other way. Worst part is he became really good friends with her mom. She never suspected a thing. He used his uniform to earn trust and abuse his power. She said she was in love with him. I stopped hanging out with her so much and we moved a couple months later. I was taking some long-distance courses in order to complete my university degree. One particular class was an economics class. The professor for that semester was filling in for the regular and had never taught long distance before and was using the regular professor's materials. No big deal, it's really not that hard. So midterms roll around. We write the multiple choice midterm and our proctors mail it back to them. Being as there are people across the country and often in other countries taking the course, the tests take a while to come back and be graded. Cool, no problem. So one day we log into the online courseware and see that our grades are posted, along with a very long and ranty email from the professor. The entire class failed the midterm. She insisted that she double and triple checked the answer key, and that it was right, and that she never had such a thing happen before. She also admonished us for not studying hard enough, and that we really had to work to pass the final. As you can imagine, there was nothing but uproar amongst the class. No one could believe that not even one person passed the midterm. So we waited for the midterms to be returned to us. Along the way, she decided to compromise and offer us a very fair final, doubling all the midterm marks so they were where they should be and to use the better mark between the two for the course grade, as long as the final was passed. Now it's 3 weeks before the final and everyone is flipping out to ensure we completely understand the material. Online study groups are created with questions and discussions abound. Then midterms began arriving back at students' homes. We began posting questions about the answers. Why was X wrong for question A? The professor gave very lengthy and detailed answers for the first few that had been posted. We were confused. The answers that she had given us were to questions that weren't on our midterms. The professor went silent. After berating us for being idiots and insisting it wasn't her fault, the professor profusely apologized for inadvertently correcting all the exams using the answer key for a different version of the exam. Had a locksmith try and fix an atrium door we have in our house. Something in the deadbolt mechanism broke and it refused to retract. This guy came in and couldn't get the lock apart. That is to say, he couldn't figure out how to get the bolts out and tried to get the faceplate off with a pry bar. Then he decided he needed to take the slab out of the opening, except the hinges were tamper-proof. So once the pins were out, he still couldn't get the door out. He tried prying the crap out of the hinges with another larger pry bar, damaging the door in the process. The next day, I was able to get the bolts out and got the door open myself. What the heck, dude? Maybe it was just his first day. Let me just start by saying I've had a peanut and nut allergy since infancy. When I was in preschool, there was a day that they were serving PB&J sandwiches. Me, being the smart little squeaker I was, called attention to the fact that I can't eat PB&J because I'm allergic to peanuts. One of my teachers came over to me, grabbed my sandwich, opened it up, and wiped the side with mostly peanut butter against the edge of a table and put it back together and gave it to me. I gave her a dead, confused, and repulsed stare, followed by a courteous, "Can I have something else, please?" The girl then fetched me broccoli and cheddar soup, and I ate that instead with pride. Later, of course, I told my mother, who rose up all hell. I mean, seriously, what the heck? Not only should my teachers have known about my allergies, but they should have had the sense to know that even the smallest amount of peanut butter will still in fact cause an allergic reaction. I had an electrician who claimed he could do network cabling. Added 3 network points the same way you added power sockets, by running a spur from one existing network point. The result? 4 network points in the office, perfect in every way except that you could only use one at a time. I don't think that's the result you wanted. When I was 6, I was sent to a therapist for ADHD. He decided to give me 11 different medications over the course of a few months. They made me appear to be completely insane. My behavior became strange and violent. My parents eventually made me a day patient at the local asylum because they caught me talking to things that weren't there. Thankfully, the therapist there got me off the cocktail and told my parents to sue the original therapist. I still remember the nightmares and hallucinations that would blend together. Let this be a lesson to always get a second opinion. After some severe bleeding, I went to the ER to see if maybe I'd had a miscarriage. Up till this point, there hadn't been any reason to think I may have been pregnant. The doctor ran a test and came back to tell me, "Congratulations, you're fertile, Myrtle, and yes, it miscarried." When I was a teen, I went to the ER because I had been bit by a cat. The doctor told me I should take antibiotics and asked what kind I wanted. To clarify, I'm not a doctor, nor was I one at age 13. I told the psych doctor in a mental facility that I had mood swings sometimes, but that they were always caused by something and were not random. Then he asked me if I ever saw or heard things. I said, aside from 2 or 3 of those minor, unreal images we all have when we're trying to wake up, nothing really. That was probably the wrong thing to say, because then he diagnosed me with having schizoaffective disorder. It tore my parents apart, and I had to explain to them several times that this guy was full of crap and blowing things out of proportion. Fortunately, my next doctor wasn't so quick to rush to judgment. My coworker doesn't know how to transfer calls. She just tells people to hang up and call us again and ask the receptionist for someone else. I feel like we all have that one coworker, right? In 4th grade, I hurt my ankle during recess and told my teacher I thought it was broken. I mean, my ankle had swelled to the size of an orange. Of course, the teacher dismissed me and had me go to the nurse, who said it was just a little sprain. I walked home that day, 8 blocks, with a shattered ankle. When I got home, I showed my mom and we went to the ER and I had to wear a cast for 8 weeks. Thanks, Teach. I work as a summer rec director for the local school district, so I basically spent my days watching 30 children of various ages run around a playground and get into trouble. Now, some of these kids have special needs, and in that case may have an aide to help keep an eye on them. One day, some boys around 10 found a hornet's nest in the ground, and unknown to me, decided to poke it with a stick. This understandably ticked off the bees, so they started to swarm around the area. I realized and started to warn the kids to stay away. While I did, a boy named Tim with autism started wandering over, oblivious to the problem in my shouts. His aide just stood there and watched him do it. I ran across the park, grabbed him, and carried him away, slapping the bees the whole time. He got stung 5 times, twice in the face. The aide said she had a phobia of bees and didn't want to get too close. I'm sorry, but it's your job. You gotta take one for the team there. You grab the kid and you run. I'm sure you have a phobia of being hit by cars too. You wouldn't just let him walk into the street. I applied for an apartment at a nice apartment complex in my town, and several months later, I got a phone call about a maxed out credit card I didn't own. As it turns out, the guy who processed credit checks was opening credit cards with the info on rental applications and maxing them out. He was genuinely surprised when he got caught. According to the arresting officer, he had over 50 stolen cards when they arrested him. I had a situation like this happen at a place where I once worked where you could open a credit card in the store. One of the employees had a thing going where he was filling out fake applications and getting credit cards under other people's names. I remember the day the police came in and walked him out in handcuffs. You're always going to get caught doing something like that eventually. When working in a salon, this one girl would burn women on purpose with a curling iron if they annoyed her. She didn't last long. Bad attitude won't get you far. Well, yeah, you can't have an employee who's assaulting the customers. For the teachers out there, what are some stories about horrible parents you've had to deal with? I have a student who, while out on the playground, slapped another kid in the face. He was obviously taken into the office where the student then claimed that the wind blew his hand and that's what caused the slapping action. But it wasn't actually him. It was just the wind. It was a nice, sunny, mildly breezy day. Not at all possible. The student was in the office for physical aggression towards another student and looking at a one-day in-school suspension. Clearly not his first offense. The principal calls home per the standard protocol in our district, and the parents believed his story, so much so that the parents actually came in with a lawyer to meet with the principal and to get all the charges dropped. Despite 2 noon aides and a kid with a nice red mark on his face, this student was sitting back in my classroom in the afternoon getting off completely for a blatant attack on another student. I feel like all he learned from this experience is that he can do whatever he wants, and his parents will let him get away with it to the best of their ability. These parents actually dragged their lawyer into the principal's office? Come on. A student of mine, first grade, came to school every day without a jacket, and when asked about it, he told me his jacket was too small and his family couldn't afford a bigger one. When winter came around, I raided the closet in the front office for a donated jacket for him. He lucked out, and there was a brand new jacket with matching hat and mittens in there, so I put them in a box I had laying around and tucked them into his backpack. They were a little big, so I hoped he'd grow into them. I told him there was a present for him in his backpack, but to wait until he got home to open it, as to not leave him vulnerable to questions and taunting from his classmates. The next day was warmer, so I wasn't shocked to see him without the coat. However, what was shocking was that his mother showed up at pickup in the family's SUV wearing that jacket. I had to have a talk with the poor guy and arrange for a recess jacket for him that he left in his cubby so his mom wouldn't take another one. You know, most decent parents would put their kids first and not steal the clothing off their back. My mom is a kindergarten teacher, and she had this one terrible student who not only kicked her in the face while she was helping him with his work, but he actually stole her digital camera from her desk drawer. She keeps it at work to take pictures of kids' projects and events and stuff to share with parents. His parents suggested that my mom shouldn't bend down to help students lest she be within kicking range, and to leave her valuables at home. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of stories like this where parents are just raising little monsters. I don't think I have any worst stories, but I mostly notice a lot of trends. Parents are starting to tell teachers not to bother them with details about their child's education. For example, little Johnny's failing. Why are you calling me about that? I also notice quite a large number of parents who don't try to discipline their children at all. I had a student who was doing poorly and was always falling asleep in class. I called the father to talk and notify him about the marks, and to suggest that maybe he needed more sleep. The father said, "What am I supposed to do about that?" It's actually quite a common statement. The parents that bothered me the most were the parents of a boy with special needs. Every day they sent him the same lunch, macaroni with nothing on it. I asked them at the first conference why they did this, and his mom said, "It's not like he'll notice." It was sad because he really did notice. When we had special lunch days, he would get so excited about hot dogs or pizza. It's indicative of how well they treated him overall, and they didn't try to engage or stimulate him. I was one of 4 teachers in a conference with Dee's mother and a school counselor. I was the last of the teachers to talk, but I said much the same as the other teachers. Dee skips class all the time, yells out constantly, never does his work, and regularly calls you over to ask questions before farting. Dee was awful. Who behaves like that in 10th grade? Anyway, after all 4 of the teachers said essentially the same thing, Dee's mom looked at the counselor and asked, "I don't understand why all these teachers are lying about my son." Dee's 2 older brothers were in jail. I assume Dee followed in their footsteps. Sounds like this lady's just clueless. Not from a classroom, but I had this one parent of a kid in my Girl Guide unit who was just awful. When we first met her kid, she would always ask questions about everything, didn't listen to instructions, and would then ask questions about everything she missed, and was generally clueless. Then we met her mother, and it all made sense. The first time we met her, she tried to sell us life insurance. That was her job. And in the first 5 minutes of talking to her, she started about 4 topics, yet never finished any of them. She drove around in an uninsured car, the irony, and would often offer to pick up or drop off other people's kids as well. She was also always late for everything. Last to drop off, last to pick up. Here's where the story gets even worse. I guess she used to homeschool her kids, which is scary to think about. In grade 1, she put her kid in public school. Every time she had a problem with the school her kid attended, she pulled her kid from the school and moved her to another school. It got to the point where the kid had gone to 4 different schools in less than a year. Her learning was severely behind, and it was hard for her to make and keep friends. I feel so sorry for whatever poor teachers had to deal with this mom. I was a humanities teacher briefly, and I had a meeting with the mother of a boy due to his ongoing behavior problems in class. Bright kid, very creative, just couldn't stop distracting some of his classmates. No biggie, really. Mom brought our meeting to a premature end by announcing, "Readings for homosexuals," and storming out of the room, yanking her kid along behind her. Poor kid never had a chance. Not a teacher, technically, I'm a juvenile counselor. But on Monday, I saw a kid who was brought in by her aunt and uncle. Dad was in jail and mom was a junkie. I kept trying to help them come up with rewards for good behavior, like trips to the zoo, family picnic, an hour of outside playtime with the kid, and they just kept saying how no one likes her and how she hates everything. Worst was, when I was asking the kid what happens when you steal, that was her crime, she said, "You get abandoned." Ugh, that one will hit you right in the gut, won't it? One of my best friends is a French teacher who came from France and became an American citizen. He's white and after living here for about 5 years, got a job in a majority black school. After he taught there for a few months, a mom decided to play the race card, came storming into his classroom and said her daughter said he was the biggest racist she'd ever seen, then threatened to get him fired. He let her rant and rave in front of the class, and when she finally paused for a breath, he turned around his wedding picture. He's married to a black woman. He said her mouth dropped open, but no sound came out, and she kinda slunk out of the classroom. His kids were crying, they were laughing so hard. My mom is a special ed teacher. She had a parent-teacher meeting with the parents of a severely disturbed young man with multiple problems. During the conference, the mother casually asked, "I'm not really sure, but do you think that maybe the reason my son has so many problems is because I smoked meth every day while I was pregnant with him?" The whole room was in stunned silence for about 30 seconds before my mom piped up with, yes. I agree. That's probably the reason. Most laughable experience I've had was with a plagiarism case. Kid had ripped his entire essay off the internet. I'd googled a few sentences from his assignment and found the page where he got the stuff from and printed it out so the kid could see that the 2 copies were word for word. He aggressively denied it, so we got his mom in for an interview. I showed her the submitted assignment and the webpage printout, and her answer was that her dopey 15-year-old boy had actually written the Wikipedia entry on the Treaty of Versailles, so it wasn't plagiarism at all. Nothing like supportive parents. I teach at a dance studio, and last week some of my 2-year-olds just kept biting their arms for unknown reasons. When class was over, I let the moms know, and one of them looked at me and went, "She would never!" My mouth kind of dropped as I tried to gather words, and she quickly said, "No, I'm just kidding. I just wanted to see what it would be like to be one of those parents for a second." She scared the crap out of me for a minute there. If I become a parent, I'm gonna do this at least once. I've had my fair share of parental horror stories, as it seems most of us teachers have had, but I think it's time for a pick-me-up. I teach digital arts and technology at an inner-city public high school in a gang-infested, poverty-ridden, but culturally bright neighborhood. Last year, a student of mine, let's call him A, stole a MacBook laptop out of my classroom. After scouring video footage in detail, I identified the student who took it. The kid lied repeatedly to me about not taking it, and security couldn't find it on him or anywhere anywhere else at all. After escaping security, A picked up the laptop from another student, who he planted the laptop on earlier in the day, took it home, painstakingly cleaned the white keyboard and casing with a Q-tip, then promptly sold it to some dudes on the street for $500 cash. 2 days later, a random girl tells me about how A planted the laptop on the random kid. The accomplice admits, security calls A back in and gets his father into the school. Dad is furious with A. He takes A into their car and makes A drive through the streets of the hood to find the dudes he sold the laptop to. Dad forces A to buy the laptop back from the guys he sold it to for a markup price of $600, which A paid. The next morning, Dad makes A return the laptop back to my classroom in better condition than when he stole it. Not one file missing and sparkling white MacBook. There's hope for us yet. We had to squeeze in at least one good parent, right? My stepfather was having parent-teacher conferences and he was talking to this kid's parents. The parents had a question about when my stepfather was going to go over the Civil War. My stepfather said it would be in about a week or so. The parent said, "Great, because we'll pull our kid from the unit. We believe the Civil War never happened and we're under the Confederate government." My stepfather was flabbergasted and didn't know how to respond. Then the parents got up and said to him, "We'll also pull our kid for the World War II unit because the Holocaust was made up and never happened." Some people just love to believe what they want to believe, don't they? I could list all the terrible phone calls, conferences, and emails where parents blame everything except their child's actions for the reason they're in trouble. They're so numerous I can't even begin to count them. The one that's different than all of those, and the only one like it that I've encountered, was one with one of my AP English students. It was a typical parent-teacher conference. AP parents were flying in and out, since almost all the kids are doing well. This one super sweet girl and her mother come in and sit down. I tell them she is a 99% in the class. 99% total, as in an A+. Without missing a beat, the mom looks at her daughter with big time attitude and says, "What can we do to get that to 100? My mouth dropped. I said, "Well, we still have a semester, so there's time for extra credit." And then I made a mistake of adding, "But you know a 99 is really great." That was a mistake. The mom jumps out of her chair and starts yelling at me that I should mind my own business, and that she has high expectations of her daughter to become more than just a high school teacher. I hate parents, which is why I don't plan on ever becoming one. This mom needs a reality check. Her daughter's doing great. You have no need to be so hard on her. No worse story, but after 25 plus years in the classroom, I can tell you that awful kids generally have truly messed up parents. It's pretty shocking, really. Frequently horrible, in fact. We've had teachers physically attacked during parent conferences in our nice little town in the heart of America, and the parents get a slap on the wrist. I like teaching and have had a rewarding career, but I would not do it again. I don't want my kid to become a teacher either. That really says a lot, doesn't it? A story from my friend who's a high school teacher. A student turned in an exam with suspiciously similar solutions to a person near them. From past performance and the seating arrangement, it was clear which one of them was copying. My friend had some of the other teachers look through the exams to see if they would notice the same thing, which they all did. The student's mother came in and said that the teacher just didn't like her daughter and was just accusing her of cheating for that reason. When the principal said that several other teachers agreed with the assessment that her daughter had cheated, the mother said, "Well, then the teacher put her next to a good student to force her to cheat so she would get in trouble." I'm sorry, what? Is this lady delusional? My mother is a teacher. This is only the worst one. There are more. She was teaching a class in elementary school that had a severely mentally handicapped girl in it. I'm talking constant drooling, unable to form words, just grunts and moans and yells. She clearly belonged in special ed, but her parents refused. They insisted she be put in a normal class because she doesn't need special ed. The classes were completely useless for her, and her noise and mess seriously disrupted the education of 30 other students. The school even had to pay an aide to be with her all day because she couldn't take care of herself. When the school finally decided to go ahead and put her in special ed, the parents sued the district because apparently their 12-year-old with the mentality of a 3 to 4-year-old did not belong in special ed in their minds. Teachers had to spend their days in court instead of their classrooms, and my mom had to deal with lawyers and parents telling her she had no idea what was best for their kid. The only winners in this scenario are the lawyers. My dad is a principal and once suspended a girl for wearing a shirt that showed her whole stomach and then refused to put on another shirt to cover herself up. This was not her first or her worst offense, and he was fed up. The parents came in to discuss the situation. The dad didn't want to believe his daughter should be suspended, so he attempted to lunge at my dad and fight him. He called him all kinds of names and said he was going to mess him up. I can't remember, but I think the dad ended up getting arrested. My story isn't so bad, but I once worked with a parent who was really racist and tried to build a completely ridiculous case about why her son couldn't work with our black instructors. She wouldn't even look at them. Other than that, I'm constantly dealing with parents who are completely in denial about their children's abilities and have insane expectations, which is pretty horrible. All parents want their kids to be amazing and be the best, but let's be honest, not all of them have that potential. My wife is an experienced teacher. We live in a fairly rural northern area, and the school she just left is in one of the poorer towns. Typical bad was going an entire year without ever seeing a kid's parents or getting any response to correspondence. Also typical was kids without coats, hats, or gloves. She collected from our friends and left extras out in class. She had her personal property stolen all the time. Worse, kids dealing in the 7th and 8th grade, girls cutting and drinking and things like that, to dealing with assault trauma, girls pregnant, boys with fractured skulls, lost eyes, and fights with older boys and adults. Worst was a stretch of 7 years in which every year she had at least one of the following: kid's parent murdered, kid murdered, one time 2 in 1 year, kid's parent murdered the other parent, kid's parent took their own life, or kid's parent murdered another parent then took their own life. I finally convinced her she's paid her dues and she needed to take a break for her own sanity, making $20,000 less now at an alternative school, but doesn't cry every day. That's gotta be a heartbreaking situation to have to deal with every day for years. I can't begin to imagine. I had a student whose mother had divorced his father and both had remarried. He lived with his mom and stepdad, and his biological dad wasn't in his life. Just before his freshman year of high school, this was the year I had him, his biological father allegedly assaulted his stepdaughter and was facing possible jail time. For reasons that are a complete mystery to me, my student's mom started giving all the money she could to the father to help pay for legal expenses. I have no clue why she would do this, and especially why the stepdad would agree to it. My student had no winter coat and received nothing for Christmas because they couldn't afford it. All the money went to his deadbeat dad instead of him and his siblings, and he had a 5-year-old sister with special needs. The saddest part, he told me he was sure his father was guilty. Why would you take away money from a child who has all kinds of potential to give it to a scumbag who's just going to be going to prison? We had an over-attentive and incredibly enthusiastic parent of a 4-year-old girl that suffered from shaken baby syndrome. The child was very emotionally stunted, couldn't walk, and could barely speak. It was really sad, and she wasn't making much progress. Whenever we would get time to talk to her mother about her daughter's care, she would immediately change the direction of the conversation to be about herself. There also were several stories floating around in regard to how her child got this way. Absolutely none of them made sense and were constantly changing. Without giving away a lot of personal information, over time it became pretty obvious that super special ed mom had some kind of Munchausen by proxy. But we had no proof, and just had to watch the little girl for any other signs of abuse, such as incorrect medications, cuts, or bruises, and if found, report it to a nurse and guidance counselor that would alert CPS. I left a few months after this drama and never heard any follow-up about it. My first and only year teaching 8th grade was a doozy. I was 21, and all my energy and excitement about teaching was quickly zapped by parents dead set on proving me incapable of doing my job. I had parents sending graded papers back to me with my comments corrected and challenged. One day, I was called into the headmaster's office to discuss my use of foul language in the classroom after a parent learned I had told a kid to stop dorking around. The worst by far was a mother who somehow got my cell number and just constantly harassed me at the end of the year, all because she wanted her child to get a wholly undeserved A. This mother had a reputation, but I was in no way prepared for her full-out abuse. When her daughter, whom I'd repeatedly suggested receive some kind of outside academic assistance, ended up with a generous B- in the class, she just lost it. I was visiting my sick grandmother when she started texting me, demanding to see the final exams. Being as they were final exams, I was not intending to return them to the students. However, this woman had the headmaster so wrapped up in her crazy that he called me and requested that I have my landlord open my house door so someone could go grab the exams while I was out of town. This is on top of the mom's text messages like, "You'll never work again," and "Those tests are mine. I paid for them. I want what I deserve." At what point does this kind of thing become harassment? I had a student who dressed in the goth fashion, black pants and metal band t-shirt, long hair and polished nails. He was bullied relentlessly by boys, girls, and even other teachers. Every day I'd try to fend off the verbal abuse, knowing my classroom was the only 45-minute reprieve he would get. Soon he joined science club just so he'd have a pass to eat in my room at lunch instead of the cafeteria. He was a really smart kid. He easily aced the tests and helped along the other students with labs. I saw him building friendships in class. Then he started skipping school. He started missing my class and falling behind. When he came back after close to 2 weeks, he was even more withdrawn. He came to class and he turned in all the work he'd missed. He checked my website, but skipped out on science club. After a few days of this pattern and him refusing to talk to me, I called home. My intent was to tell his parents how worried I was for him. My worry was he might hurt himself. I said, "Hello, I'm calling about your son blank. I'm his biology teacher." Before I could go any further, his mom says, "I don't need to hear it. I'm pulling him out of school tomorrow. He's his own problem now." She hung up on me and I cried. I talked to my principal and student counselor and they promised they'd look into it, but he was withdrawn from school that week. He's still in my mind 5 years later. I'll always wonder what happened because I was a little goth kid once too. That's great that you reached out to this kid that you saw was having problems. You probably really did something great for them. Sometimes it's a shame the parents have as much control as they do. What's your, "Oh, so that's what it was for" moment that took you too long to find out? Those little green swords at Starbucks. I had no clue what they were used for until I was complaining one day that my coffee gets all over the lid when I walk. My friend grabbed one and stuck it in the top of the lid and asked why I didn't use a stopper. A stopper! Oh my god, my life has just changed. I just learned something too. Of course, I don't drink coffee, but anyway. I'm sure we're going to be learning a lot of things this video. Not me, but my dad. He always likes to look nice and put together. One day before church, I was maybe 14, I asked him if he had a lint roller. He got it for me and it was absolutely covered in lint. So I ripped off the top sheet. My dad's eyes widened in shock. "I always thought lint rollers were so expensive for how few times you could use them." He never knew there were more sheets underneath. Dad was in his mid-50s then. He hates when I tell that story. When I realized that the division sign is an empty fraction. Dude, you just blew my mind. That the approximately correct amount of loose leaf tea for 1 cup is a teaspoonful. That one makes sense. Not sure if this is a feature on all smoke detectors, but finally after 5 years of owning my house and getting used to grabbing a chair and knocking the batteries out of it, I just hit the test button on the front when it went off while cooking. Hush mode activated. It turns it off for 15 minutes and automatically turns itself back on. It felt like unlocking a secret character in Mortal Kombat. For years, I've had this electrical outlet on my back porch that's really intermittent. The thing works about half the time, then stops working for a couple weeks. Really frustrating. About 6 years after I bought the house, I also figured out what that one switch in the living room does. You know the plastic hooks on vacuum cleaners that are used to wind the cord around? Well, the top hook will spin 180 degrees to release the cord, so you don't have to spend time unwinding. I didn't realize this till my wife showed me well into my 30s. It took me 4 years of owning a car to realize I could spray washer fluid onto the rear windshield. I just assumed it only sprayed the front, and I would occasionally throw a bucket of water on the back if I needed to. Then one day, I just noticed an odd symbol on a lever I hadn't seen before. Held that mother down for about 10 seconds before a massive gush of liquid burst out of the back and changed my life for the better. I feel like that last sentence out of context could really go the wrong way for you. Clapperboards in movies. They're used as a visual reference to sync the audio and the video together in editing. Have you guys seen those escalators with the green lights shining through the steps? When I was very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old, I asked my dad what those lights were for. He told me they were for the blind. A few years ago maybe, when I was about 23 or 24, I got on one of those escalators with lights again with a friend of mine. I wanted to tell my friend this little fact that my dad had told me years ago about the lights in escalators. But as soon as I wanted to explain, I realized my dad was trolling me the whole time. It took me just under 20 years to realize it. I think we all have that one thing that we were told as a kid that took us way too long to realize wasn't true. I was a housekeeper for someone years back when I was in college. Side job, extra money. I would see short straws in random places at the house where I worked. I usually just picked them up and threw it in the trash can. It took me 2 years to realize the person I worked for had a drug addiction and he was using the straws to snort. Now I look back and I'm glad I wore gloves to clean other people's houses. I bought a used pickup truck in the late 90s that had an electronic key fob like any car does these days. It had a couple other buttons as well that, when pressed, seemed to do nothing. I asked them about it at the dealership and they told me it was probably for a remote start that wasn't hooked up. After 2 years of driving that truck around in cold Chicago winters, I sold the truck to my brother when I bought my first new car. One day, while talking to him, he started the car up with the remote starter. I stared in complete shock as he explained that you have to hold the button down. It's always a humbling moment when someone knows how to use something that was yours better than you do. I had no idea that salad spinners were to dry your salad. I thought they were to mix your salad dressing or something. We got one as a wedding gift. So I loaded one up, dumped some dressing in, and it spun a ton of the dressing off the salad. This made me think that the product was to apply dressing flavor to all of your salad bits without dealing with all the extra calories that come from overloading on the dressing. So naturally, I thought it was a total waste of time and money and tossed it into a cabinet to never be used again. A year goes by and I see a comment on Reddit about how salad spinners are such a game changer and so worth it. And I thought people were just crazy. Nope, I'm the idiot here. They're to dry your washed salad bits so you have nice, crisp, non-soggy salad. I had no idea, and the box sure as heck didn't tell me that. I worked with a guy on a construction site and it took him 7 months to realize that the porta potties had urinals in them. He thought that the bowl was in there for a sink that they put in the nicer ones. Just today at the gym, I forgot my shower sandals and I was like, oh sweet, they have disposable slippers just in case of such an event. I put them on and walked through the change room, used them, they worked well, until I realized that they were shower caps. I mean, you can use them for that. After high school, I was working a temp job in a business remodel. The wood floors had been put in and the contractor had a big roll of paper that he taped down to cover the floor to prevent scuffs and scrapes while the work continued. One time I touched the roll of paper and noted that it was somewhat sturdier than normal paper and reminded me of the craft paper that we used in elementary school. Then I remembered that as a child, the teacher always called it construction paper. The bagel button on toasters only toasts one side of the bagels or bread or buns. When I was a kid, I had a large toy box with a lid. I had to use my head to prop up the lid when I grabbed things. There was a place to put a stick to prop it open. I noticed that there was a stick kept in the kitchen for me and my brother's spankings. By the time I realized the stick was originally meant for the toy box, I had outgrown the toy box. Your parents were essentially beating you with your toys? That's kind of messed up. The wiggly metal bracket on the end of a tape measure is like that on purpose. The amount it wiggles matches its thickness, so you can take inside measurements and push it in, or outside measurements and pull it out, and you'll get consistent measurements. I lived in the US for a year, and I was really annoyed about our light switches. They didn't lead to any lamps. There were no lamps in the ceiling at all, and I couldn't figure out why we had switches on the wall. I was also super annoyed that a few sockets worked sometimes, but not all the time. I never talked to our landlord because frankly, he scared me. And since I was moving back soon, I just figured I'd live with it. Fast forward 11 months when I visited a friend's house. I couldn't turn on her big floor lamp. Just do it like this, she said, and flip the light switch on the wall. It turns out in America, light switches can lead to sockets in the wall. I can see how that would be incredibly frustrating to someone who's not used to it. For years, I thought those weird storage pod thingies some cars and vans have on the top of the roof were mini canoes. As in, I kinda thought that until I was like 24, but was too nervous to ask anyone. Since as long as I can remember, my mom has kept this creepy doll hung up on our wall in our garage, right next to the door to go into the house. The thing's a real eyesore, clothes are ugly, and it's just this raggedy thing. So recently, I asked my mom why the heck she keeps this ugly demon doll hung up on the wall, and she says, "Really? It holds plastic bags." She walks up to it and pulls a plastic grocery bag out of its butt. 19 years in that house, and I always thought my mom just had some weird taste in decoration. To be fair, you could use anything as a plastic bag dispenser. It doesn't need to be this creepy doll. I think your mom's taste is still a little off. That I did not need to put eggs in the refrigerator egg holder one by one. That instead, I could put it on top of the eggs in the case and simply flip it over. Well, yeah, but then all your eggs are upside down. That dryer sheets prevent static cling. I always assumed you put them in to make your clothes smell better. So when I moved out, I just never bought any. Then one day I had to do laundry at my mom's house. In the middle of switching the laundry, I'm complaining about the socks all stuck to the blanket. And my mom says, "Well, put in a dryer sheet, dummy." Oh, so that's what those are for. Those travel toothbrushes. I always carried one on me and always wondered why they made them so tiny. Until one day on vacation with my girlfriend, I'm using it and she says, "Why don't you use it normally?" Then she grabs the casing for the toothbrush and attaches it to the bottom of the brush. Mind blown. I always wondered why there was a G in the stylized Disney logo, and it honestly took me like 15 years to figure out it was a D the whole time and I was just an idiot. So I was a first-year medical student and was late to class and ran in sweating through my Oxford shirt and khakis. The lecturer was some esteemed local windbag cardiologist. As I sat down, he stated very grandly, "The most important part of the stethoscope is the part between the earpieces." I took my stethoscope out and started looking at the little spring thing that connected the two earpieces together, trying to figure out why that little cheap part was so important. After way longer than it should have, it occurred to me that he was talking about the doctor's brain, and dropped my stethoscope like it was hot and hoped no one saw me examining the little spring thing. Condensed soup. I always wondered why the cans were smaller yet tasted super salty and were thick. I never took the time to read the instructions about how you're supposed to add water. I went 39 years without knowing. One day, I finally asked my wife, and after she stopped laughing, she explained it to me. Growing up, my mother raised me to never look in her purse because it was rude to rifle through other people's belongings. At 7 years old, I felt like a rebel and looked through her purse while she was out gardening. I found her lipstick, wallet, and an odd-shaped canister that looked like perfume. I figured, let's give it a shot, and sprayed some all over me, mostly my face. What I didn't realize was that it was pepper spray. I ran around screaming in utter pain. Lesson learned. I mean, she tried to warn ya. When I was a kid, my grandfather and I built a model of the 1989 Batmobile together. We worked so hard to get it together. With neither of us having built models before, it took hours. We finished up and we had one green piece left. We looked through the instructions and looked all over the model. Could not figure it out. Finally, I went and got my grandma to see if she could figure it out. She came in, took one look, and it was the top of the superglue. We had forgotten to recap the superglue. "You must never forget about the piece of resistance." Took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that movie is referring to a moving picture. It's an old-fashioned term, similar to talkie. The metal square thing on a stapler can be turned around so the prongs of the staple go outwards instead of inwards. It's a lot better for temporary staples, much easier to undo. I was at an antenatal class with my wife when the instructor shared a tip for making sure you let your baby feed from each breast an equal amount, by taking it in turns left and right which one you start off with. How do you remember which one you started with? You use a hair tie. A few minutes later, she remarked, "And don't forget to put the hair tie on your other wrist when you next do a feed." To which I remarked, rather too audibly for a room of 20 strangers, "Oh, you put it on your wrist." Oops, I was a bit slow that day, and many other days. For a split second while reading this, I thought the same thing. That the pockets on suit coats and blazers and back pockets of slacks are loosely stitched closed and meant to be cut open. I spent 4 years of my life as a ticked-off pragmatist. Why the heck would you put pockets just for show? Those jerks. One day, a friend heard my incessant complaining and goes, you just make a small snip and pull the thread out, then the pockets are accessible. I go to the closet and snip open one of the pockets. Well, don't I feel stupid? I had just bought my first house and needed to patch a hole in the bathroom fan exhaust duct in the attic. I was walking around Lowe's thinking, I wonder what sort of tape I should use for ducks. Then it hit me. Duct tape for ducks. Thank you, my friend. I never put that together. Potato peelers have a little indentation on the end of them. It's used to scoop out the black parts of potatoes that you don't want to eat. My mind alternates in this thread from, I didn't know that and it's really cool, to how the heck did someone not know that? Pipe cleaners. When I was a kid, they were used for crafts and stuff, and I just figured that they were used to clean like kitchen pipes. In my kid brain, that kinda made sense. As I grew up, I just never really thought about it again. Then one day in college, I decide cigars are expensive and pipe tobacco seems much cheaper overall. Plus, the rustic feel of a man on his porch reading with a tobacco pipe always appealed to me for some reason. So I went out and bought a cheap tobacco pipe, and while I was checking out, the cashier asked me if I wanted pipe cleaners. The scales just dropped from my eyes. It took 20 plus years to learn that pipe cleaners were used to clean, pipes. I've been driving my Chevy Silverado for 9 years before I realized I could lower the seat height. It had been at max elevation the entire time. First time in the past decade I've been able to see the sky out of my windshield while driving. Q-tips. I'm British. We don't call them Q-tips, and I didn't know what they were until I was in my mid-20s and saw a meme with a photo of a Q-tip. I was genuinely shocked. People never actually use them in books or films. They just say stuff like, I think you need a Q-tip, if someone misunderstands something. I thought it was like saying, get a clue, and I'd always just assumed Q-tips were a reference to some kind of American game show. This one's just a cultural difference and a very easy mistake to make. Don't worry, we understand. In the song I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus, it's Daddy dressed up as Santa Claus. I didn't realize this until my late 30s. Yeah, the song takes on a whole new meaning when you realize Mom and Dad are just doing a little role play. Grapes on the front of raisin packages. My girlfriend told me last year that raisin and grapes are the same thing, and I laughed it off because that's nonsense. Then I saw a big grape on my raisin box. Yes, and I'm 33 years old. I never got the euphemism of Blink-182's album, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. I just thought it was a dude getting ready for bed or something, not taking off your pants and jacking it. That makes total sense considering the band. My boyfriend was around 21 when I had to explain this to him, but he asked me to have dinner at his parents' house and I asked what we were having, and he said roast beast, and I laughed at him making a Grinch joke, and then he asked me what I was talking about. I mentioned that he called roast beef roast beast, and that the Grinch reference was funny. And I realized he seriously had no idea what I was talking about. So I had to reveal to my boyfriend that roast beast is not an actual thing. It's called roast beef, and roast beast was strictly a Dr. Seuss reference. He was a little embarrassed, but it was really actually so adorable. I have a similar one to this in that I called it grilled cheese for the longest time instead of grilled cheese. It's just the way my ear heard it for some reason. I know it doesn't make sense. I learned at 27 how to properly clean a toaster. I didn't know there was a trap door at the bottom of it. I showed an Ivy League friend of mine and their mind was blown. You know, we all have gaps in knowledge sometimes, and sometimes they overlap with your friend. The fact that pineapples don't grow on trees. They're just plants. I didn't know this until I was hanging out with my friend and we were swimming in her pool. I got out and pointed to what looked to me to be a weird spiky looking plant, and she looked at me completely dumbfounded. She just looked at me and said in a disappointed voice, "That's a pineapple." I felt like my whole life at this point was just a lie. For the longest time, I genuinely thought pineapples grew on trees. That the reason baby vests have envelope shoulders is so that when they do a poop that explodes all over the vest, you can remove the vest downwards instead of lifting it over their head and smearing poop all over their face. When you first walk into a Home Depot, there's always a stack of orange buckets by the entrance. And for the longest time, I thought they were Home Depot's equivalent of a shopping basket. I'd haul that thing around just throwing screws and hardware into it and then just put it next to the cash register when I was done. They'd always ask if I wanted the bucket too, and I just thought it was a clever way of selling more buckets. Only about a month ago did I realize they're just buckets, and everyone at Home Depot just thought I was mentally imbalanced. Hey, you know what? You're making use of it. I'm not going to fault you on that one. When I finally figured out why Dad's special cigarettes smelled so different from regular cigarettes, then his room full of black lights, incense, psychedelic art, and old-fashioned pipes made a lot of sense. I got my driver's license while only using the clutch pedal for driving in reverse. I didn't even know you had to use your accelerator until my girlfriend pointed it out after having my license for over a year. I would think the instructor would have caught that one, but I guess that's on them, not you. When I was little, I was fascinated by TV guides. I thought shows on television were just aired totally at random. I used to stare at the TV guides and whisper, "How do they know?" The image of this one is just kinda cute. As a toddler, I always loved it in church when we'd sing about some bear named Gladly, and who happened to be cross-eyed. Every time, it painted a cute picture in my child mind. A cuddly teddy bear with crossed eyes and a sweet smile. I'll never forget the disappointment of learning to read and opening the hymn book for the first time to Gladly the Cross-Eyed Bear. I had to explain to a friend of mine who was 19 at the time that large people were obese, not a beast. I have earbud headphones, and where the cord splits, there was this slider thing. The whole time I thought it was something to adjust the length or something. Then I found myself untangling my headphones, and I said to myself, if these two ends didn't split up, things wouldn't be so bad. Then it hit me. That sliding thing was there to keep the ends together and stop it from getting tangled. Some people also use it to just tighten it up to your chin if you're going to be moving around and working out or something, but that's one way to use it too, I guess. Not me, but my brother. He would have been around 15 at the time. We were at an amusement park in line for lunch. My mother turns to him and asks what he wants. He pauses for a sec, then says, "I want a cheeseburger, but with no cheese." At this point, I do what any older brother does and start to laugh a little bit and ask him the question again. Same response. At this point, he knows he's doing something stupid. So I ask him, "You mean a hamburger, right?" He says, "I don't want ham." You know, I can see how that could be misleading though.
Reddit, what's the most messed up food your parents would make regularly when you were a kid? Get ready for a lot of cursed things in this post. My mom would mix cooked mac and cheese with applesauce in a bowl and give it to us. My mom was from the quote, boil the ever-loving crap out of everything school of cooking. Carrots boiled to sad orangish lumps, broccoli steamed beyond any recognition. Corn may have started fresh, but by the time she was done with it, it resembled creamed corn but lacking any possible flavor or texture. Barbecue chicken? Boil that son of a gun completely before you blacken it on the grill, lest you and everyone you love die horrifically from salmonella. The things she would do to a steak are crimes against humanity. Combine all this with an 80s desire to avoid salt at all costs, and my dad's pathological fear of bad breath resulting in a blanket household ban on onions and garlic. And mealtime was a grayish, disappointing place. I now take cooking very seriously. When they were younger, my grandma and her siblings were forced to eat cream of mushroom soup sandwiches. Her dad would slice the soup like cranberry sauce and spread it across the bread. The thing is, listener, this is an example of two great things that don't go together. Cream of mushroom soup? My mom uses it to make tater tot casserole. It's very good. Adds a lot of richness, savoriness, and creaminess. Sandwiches? Can't go wrong with them. They're one of my favorite things to make. But a cream of mushroom soup sandwich? Are y'all out here drinking your sandwiches? My mom liked to make spaghetti. That's not weird, I hear you say. Let me mention that she made it with raisins. I already don't like this post, but we're gonna keep going. Like, get a pot of water boiling, throw in the noodles, and some raisins at the same time. No spaghetti sauce afterward, just cooked spaghetti and rehydrated raisins on a plate. She was very proud of this dish, and she didn't understand why we hated Mom's day to cook. Edit. Guys, I know a raisin is a dehydrated grape, but rehydrating it doesn't just turn it back into a grape. It turns it into some disgusting raisin juice bomb, which is even worse when warm. I'm really trying hard to understand the thought process that leads to a person deciding to cook spaghetti with raisins, but I'm drawing a blank. So bear with me on this, but I have an explanation. Not a justification, but an explanation. On the island of Sicily, one of the regions of Italy, some meat dishes actually include raisins or golden raisins. For example, Betrayal. That's Braciole. It's a meat dish that's a roulade, which is a rolled and stuffed meat that contains stuff like cheese, herbs, and breadcrumbs. I've never had raisins with meat before, but if Italy is doing it, home of the best pizza and pasta in all of the world, I have no reason to judge them. Quote, asparagus salad, which consisted of 5 to 6 limp, cold pieces of canned asparagus served on a bed of iceberg lettuce with a glob of mayo on top. Yeah, there's no bearing with me on this one. This is just white people food. We were beyond poor, so many of my mother's creations were simply a matter of making do with what we had. That didn't make them any more palatable, though. The two most memorable: canned peas cooked in powdered milk and served over toast. She called it, quote, pea wiggle. We had it at least once a month. Canned spaghetti sauce and a slice of surplus cheese placed on a slice of bread and toasted in the oven. This was, quote, poor man's pizza. I actually loved this as a kid. Tried it again a few years ago and was less impressed. Not everything can be credited to a lack of money. She used to slice up kielbasa and steam it. The result was very much like styrofoam chips. This is a great time to mention the YouTube channel The Wolf Pit, the WOLFE Pit, all one word. It focuses on cooking on a really tight budget, so I highly recommend it if you're looking to eat cheap without having asparagus salad. My dad got into a phase of watching Emeril Lagasse, and it inspired him to try and be fancy. I'll never forget. He made these hamburger patties and put chunks of bread mixed in with the raw meat, but the bread just absorbed all the blood. They looked like huge, mushy, bloody warts hanging off the meat. It was absolutely repulsive looking. Okay, after reading that nightmare sentence, let me tell you why you should put bread in your meatballs. If you take some day-old bread, tear it up into chunks, and soak them in milk or preferably heavy cream, maybe throw in some seasonings into it, that's called a panade. When mixed into your meatballs, it actually helps retain moisture and prevents dry, sad meatballs. But don't just stick plain white bread into your burgers, that's just not going to work out well for anybody. My mom used to make a Vietnamese noodle dish called bun dieu, but didn't always have time to make it from scratch, so she often used a canned broth. I am allergic to peanuts, and every time she made this dish, I would complain to her that I didn't want to eat anymore because my lips were swelling up and I was itchy. She is having none of that sass, obviously, and makes me eat the whole bowl. Few years down the line, she decides to read the ingredients label on the back and just says, you should probably stop eating that. As was the custom in the 1950s to the 1980s, when my parents were coming of age, my parents only ate vegetables boiled and unseasoned. So, boiled carrots, boiled Brussels sprouts, etc. No salt, no pepper, no olive oil or butter. This led me to believe that vegetables are supposed to taste bad. Later in life, I discovered seared, roasted, caramelized, and seasoned vegetables, and those things are the bomb. Every day, I'm caramelizing or roasting a veggie. Mom would make frozen whitefish, baked in an oven until it was overcooked and just dehydrated, shrunken fillets of white fish. Then, she'd serve it with boiled cauliflower and white rice. White entree, white starch, white vegetable, all served on a white plate. What did we drink? Yeah, milk. White milk. My mom made, and still makes, a dish called cat heads. It's basically chicken with cream of celery, some vegetables, and a bit of stew inside 2 rolled up crescent rolls. It looks exactly like a shaved, cooked cat's head, so she called it that and we have it every Christmas. This comment actually says, so basically mini chicken pot pies but shaped like cat heads? I would eat that, and I gotta say, I agree with that. I freaking demolish chicken pot pie every time I have it. They would wrap bologna around a banana, and that was my snack. I don't know where the idea came from. I freaking hated it. I just don't know, guys. I grew up to become allergic to bananas. My grandma made leftovers casserole while my mom was growing up. You take a bunch of cooked noodles, whatever leftovers seem appropriate, add a can of cream of something soup, throw a topping on it, and bake it till it's food. My mother hated it. She called it one-pot glop. Grandma made it at least once every time we visited, and I loved it. Once when I saw her cooking it, I cheered, "Yay, one-pot glop!" The look of betrayal on Grandma's face was very confusing. I made one-pot glop for breakfast this morning. Overcooked steak. Like leather tier overcooked. Grew up on a dairy farm, so beef was plentiful. But if we didn't choke down the shoe leather dinner, my mother would have a violent meltdown about how we were all ungrateful little jerks. My mom, God bless her, was not a very talented cook. She tried, but she just wasn't interested and didn't have the knack. At least I got a home-cooked meal most nights, so I can't complain. Mom used to buy these awful Polish sausages. She would take a few and throw them in a pot of water with a head of cabbage. Let everything boil for a while, and that was dinner. Mom called it, quote, bratwurst. I lived in fear of quote-unquote bratwurst my whole life until I was in college. There was a German festival and all of my friends were like, oh boy, let's go get some brats. I thought they were crazy. Then someone handed me a real brat on a bun with spicy mustard and sauerkraut, and I realized that I had been all wrong about the true nature of bratwurst. That was probably the best thing I learned in college. A dry ketchup sandwich. It was old stale bread that was broken in half for the 2 pieces of bread for a sandwich with ketchup in between them. No meat, no cheese, just ketchup. If we were lucky, the bread wasn't too stale and the taste kinda resembled French fries. This one just makes me sad. Like, not even in a pity way or a, oh, I can't believe that she would do that, she's so disgusting. This just sounds like a depression meal or a meal you would make if you were like in the negatives in your bank account. My mom loved making pork chops, but she cooked the heck out of them, so it was like eating rubber. We ended up calling the dinner Shake and Incinerate. My grandfather used to buy tubs of fish eyes and he would put them in all kinds of things. My scrambled eggs used to stare up at me. Not something they made regularly, made once, reheated leftovers for ages, but we ate it a lot for a while. My mom made what we came to call, quote, pepper soup. It initially was an accident. She was making a small batch of soup for dinner, and while shaking some black pepper in, the lid fell off and the entire container of pepper emptied itself into the soup. She scooped out what she could, but in the end, it was still way too peppery to eat. Ended up enlarging the batch of soup into 2 large canning pots, each about 5 gallons, before it was at a tolerable level. Us kids still found it way too peppery. Anyways, we ate that soup what seemed like every day for a couple months. We grew up dirt poor and relied heavily on the area's soup kitchens and food pantries. There were 5 of us kids with a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was unemployed for a few years, so we rarely could afford basic things like fruit. To keep us healthy, my dad would regularly fill an empty skim milk jug with water and add powdered milk plus powdered vitamin tablets, the type with the capsule, and shake it up, then put it in the fridge. We never really knew whether we were drinking actual milk or the vile false milk until we tasted it, since skim milk has the same appearance. To this day, my dad maintains that doing what he did kept us all healthy, as none of us got sick during his unemployment. I mean, geez, you gotta do what you gotta do. Props to that dad. My stepdad and mom used to make, quote, grilled cheese for lunch every weekend. Now, that's not so bad, right? Wrong. Bread with the knockoff Kraft processed cheese, microwaved for 2 to 5 minutes. No butter, no toast. Just soggy bread and burnt plastic cheese, if only in for 2 minutes. If it was cooked for 5 minutes, the bread would be rock hard and molten plastic. My parents have become great cooks now, but when my sister and I were kids, she was a total brat and a picky eater, so we'd wind up with plain, unseasoned chicken breasts and steamed broccoli and plain white rice way too often. And I wasn't allowed to put salt on it because salt was bad for me. And I guess it didn't occur to them to provide any condiment or something to give that crap some flavor. Okay, this isn't the first time I've heard of people's parents thinking salt is toxic, but one of my cousins is about the same age as my mom, and she is a salt fiend. We were at a Mexican restaurant one time, and she was shaking salt onto every single nacho she ate. She couldn't get enough. She wanted to be one with the salt. I swear if she ingested any more salt, she would have become a CSGO player mixed with a League of Legends streamer. I genuinely worry about the life expectancy of this woman. My mother makes this thing me and my brother can only refer to as compost salad. It starts on a skillet where she scrambles some eggs. Then, she adds 3 cups of kale and steams it, oftentimes burning the eggs in the process and releasing a vaguely fart-like scent into the atmosphere. Then, things get weird. She adds an entire can of kidney beans, bean water and all, mashing them into the eggy kale. She then adds cinnamon, nutmeg, curry powder, garlic powder, and salsa and Tabasco sauce. At this point, the smell is so nauseating it's nearly impossible to be in the same room as this abomination of a dish. After it's done being heated into mush, she puts it on a plate and adds vanilla yogurt on top. Looks like it was fished straight out of the trash. Needless to say, I refuse to let her make me food. And by the way, I really have no idea what's wrong with her, but something is definitely up if she thinks that this is an acceptable meal. Let me preface this by saying that my mother is in no way Hispanic. She is one of the whitest people I know. She grew up mainly in Central Florida and the Upper Midwest, rarely if at all coming into contact with Latin American culture except at the occasional restaurant. Despite this, she would routinely make, quote, arroz con pollo for dinner. This consisted of chicken, cooked until it was tough and chewy to ensure it was, quote, cooked through, and rolled in flavorless breadcrumbs from a can, served with a side of mealy, aggressively under-seasoned rice. Did I mention that there was almost no salt in any of this because salt was, quote, unhealthy? It was so unpleasant that I threw it right back up a few times, once even at the table. Somehow, she still wonders why I barely eat anything when I'm home for Thanksgiving. It amazes me how many of these posts mention a lack of salt. Your body needs salt. We specifically used iodized salt because a lack of iodine is one of the leading causes of preventable developmental problems in children. Pork in cider sauce. The cider in question was cheap as dirt White Lightning, the only time we actually bought it, I like to point out, and me and my sister hated it. We don't want this. Can we have something else? You ate it last time, so you must like it, so be quiet and eat it. We really don't like it. Tough. You'll eat what you're given or go hungry. My mom was awesome as we were growing up, and in all fairness, we did eat most of the things that we were given anyway, as she was a fantastic cook. But this was an abomination, beaten only by liver and onions. She stopped making it when I went to school hungry. I'd gotten up too late to eat breakfast, and the school phoned her up to express their concern and make sure there was nothing happening at home. As an American reading this, it grossed me out thinking of cooking pork in White Lightning. In America, that is usually home-distilled alcohol or moonshine. However, in the South, pork barbecue usually has a vinegar, cider-based sauce on it, and it's super tasty, so I could see where your mom was going with this. Yeah, but the only thing that was missing was the rest of the sauce. My grandma is an awful cook. She hates doing it, and you can definitely tell by the stuff she comes up with. Here's a few examples. Instant mashed potatoes with mayonnaise. Gag. Quote, peach cobbler, which was flour, peaches, and syrup. Fried chicken cooked long enough to burn it completely. Salt was the only seasoning she ever used. Spaghetti. No flavor. Just ground beef, never drained by the way, generic pasta sauce, and noodles. She got mad when I started using barbecue sauce to mask the nasty crap she made. Man, I put it in mashed potatoes, macaroni, rice, and meat. My mom was/is seriously the worst cook. The only time I ever ate anything good was when we had weekends with my dad and he took us to restaurants and let us order whatever we wanted. For a kid, I could eat a heck of a lot of lobster. My mom made these disgusting casseroles with fried Spam, Velveeta mac, and canned peas. Then it was topped off with those Kraft single slices and crushed up barbecue potato chips. She thought that was the ultimate in cooking. I still feel sick when I think about it. Sometimes for dinner, we would have chipped beef on toast, which is a disgusting, salty, Great Depression kind of food. And if it wasn't chipped beef, it was some kind of soup/tuna mixture over toast. If it came in a can, we probably ate it. This is probably why I taught myself how to cook. I went back home to visit last year, and I cooked dinner every night because I saw my mom pulling out the Spam and Velveeta, and there was no way I was going to let that happen. My dad didn't want me to leave after the 4th salted caramel apple pie I made. Not my parents, but growing up, I loved my grandmother's cooking. In retrospect, some of it was kind of weird. Her parents emigrated from Japan to Hawaii shortly after the turn of the century, and she'd have been about 7 when the Great Depression started. Combine that with World War II and frequent shipping issues, and she wound up with a lot of unusual culinary habits. Little Japanese lady, maybe 4'9" and 80 pounds on a good day, making spaghetti and adding corn. Her meatloaf had canned clams in it. I really love that one. Vienna sausages and Spam stewed in a sweet soy sauce broth, raw broccoli and sliced kamaboko fish cake sandwiches with lettuce, cucumber, and mayo, also pretty good actually. Cubes of raw tofu tossed with canned tuna, soy sauce, onions, and some other things. Growing up in Hawaii, I didn't think anything of it. If seaweed and raw fish are part of the regular menu, none of that stuff's any weirder. Anyway, she made all of that stuff for her family, plus more traditional items like maki sushi, mochiko chicken, and other delicious things. For herself though, she'd maybe have a few cubes of tofu, a bowl of miso soup, and some rice. She loved dessert and sweets, but even then, she'd take a piece of chocolate and cut it into fourths. I last saw her in 2010, when she must have been about 88. She had her good days and her bad days, but she didn't cook anymore. She passed away in 2014. I miss her. I'm gonna get gushy for a bit. I think this is one of the greatest things about cooking and food in general. Taste is one of the most powerful senses we have because it's the most intimate. Think about it, you're putting something inside your body that's going to end up everywhere else inside your body. When you eat something, you remember how it tastes. You have a vast memory of tastes, and those tastes remind you of memories. You ever hear the phrase, just like grandma used to make? That's because if you grew up on grandma's cooking, you have that, for lack of a better term, flavor connection. It's why some people cry when they have certain foods. It reminds them of home, or a loved one, or a precious memory. It's like that scene in Ratatouille when Ego has that dish Remy makes. It's not that it's made perfectly. It's made lovingly.
Parents of Reddit, what's the most absurd thing you found on your kid's social media? Not technically a parent, but an older sister. My little brother, when he was around 7-ish, had a search history of naked women and such. And when my mother found out and confronted him, he cried and was saying he just wanted to be like Jack from the Titanic by drawing naked women. And he had a few pages of his attempted drawings. Hey, maybe the kid's found his calling in art. We don't know. Was at my friend's place at around the age of 10 to 12 when my parent called me home randomly. I run in the front door and both my parents are sitting in the living room and immediately ask me to spell the word sex. I do, and then they tell me to send my brother over. My brother runs over and he'd be around 9 or 10 and doesn't come back. Turns out he searched for girls having sex but spelt it 6. These parents are over here trying to identify the digital handwriting. I found my stepdaughter's Musical.ly account. She had a bunch of poor attempts at sexy belly dancing to various Evanescence songs. She joined one of those Facebook groups. It was called Anything's an Adult Toy If You're Brave Enough. Pictures of my daughter, 11, posing quite harmlessly that went on to bum shots and short shorts. Someone pretending to be a 14-year-old girl asked her to do these shots for a modeling competition, and sent similar shots so she knew how to pose. She eventually stopped the conversation. The pics came through my iPad since the devices were linked. The police got involved and also CEOP. They originated from an account in South Africa, so Interpol took over the case and will probably never get an update. Instagram never even bothered to respond to my report. This happened to the 12-year-old daughter of a friend of mine recently. She also happened to cross it in much the same way and reported it to the police. They ended up having a huge investigation involved with the FBI, and the guy has now been sentenced to jail. My friend's daughter was one of the dozens he'd been soliciting. Keep an eye on your kids' social media, guys. You never know who's trying to contact them. I had a coworker bring her kid in during the summer so that she could run him to the local middle school for football practice when she took her break at 9. Since I was in training at the time, I was sitting with her at her desk and mine was not in use. To keep him occupied, I'd log into my computer and then she'd pull up YouTube so we could watch the Watch Me Whip song, because apparently kids will watch that for hours. Well, one day she goes over to check in on him and says in a confused voice, "Who the heck is Ed Gein?" So it turned out that it was still logged into my YouTube profile, where I had taken to watching documentaries about serial killers, and the kid had clicked on one of the recommended videos. Whoopsies. If she's really worried about what her kid's watching, then she should just create her own YouTube account. Personally, I have childlike parents. Weirdest thing so far was having to sit down and have a talk with my mother about how some things on Facebook are not real. My extended family lives in Houston, and during Hurricane Harvey, my mother was driving my elderly relatives to hysteria by emailing them horribly photoshopped pictures of Houston landmarks submerged under 50 feet of water, followed by, "It's a biblical flood! The world is ending! The news is lying to you! You're gonna die if you don't get in your car and drive out of town right now!" I talked to my stepdad and made him give me her password so I can shut down her account during the next natural disaster. Probably doing everyone in your family a favor. When I was 9 or 10, my buddy and I were on the family computer doing whatever 9 or 10-year-olds do. My friend told me to go to prettygirls.com. Seemed innocent enough, except it directed us to an adult site, and we immediately panicked and closed the browser. My mom really chewed us out when she found out. I tried to tell her we were just looking for pretty girls, but she wasn't having it. It was a long few weeks of computerless punishment. I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to bet it's something I disapprove of. My 15-year-old happily announces that he went viral because his comment amassed 1.5k likes on Reddit. "Well, what did you ask?" I asked him. "I forgot." "What's your Reddit name?" "I can't tell you." "Then why did you mention it?" With that comment having 3.5k likes itself, I'd like to think that the son saw it and got pretty jealous. That my 12-year-old son searched for pro study tips. No joke, my son, trying to study harder. Never in a million years and lives would I have expected this. When my twins were young, in elementary school, they were looking up The Simpsons and accidentally came across some adult Simpsons content. The computer was in the living room, so I heard them giggling and turned to see two guilty little faces. It was so hard not to laugh and so disturbing. What a conversation. The sight of Milhouse and Lisa is forever burned into my retinas. Looks like everything's coming up, Milhouse. When he was little, my brother once wanted to help us find a cool new purse to order for my mom's birthday. He did an image search for fun bags, and my parents had to answer a lot of questions. Not a parent, but my cousin one time got onto the computer when he was 11 or 12 or so and tried searching for indecent pictures of girls his own age. I was there when his stepdad checked through the browser history, and needless to say, he and my cousin had a chat about acceptable search terms. Yeah, that could have gotten really bad. They might be on a list now. Not social media, but I once caught both of my nieces playing an animated game online where the objective was to spank a cartoon butt with a paddle. Every time they'd swing the paddle at the butt, it would emit the sound of a woman moaning. They couldn't understand why the game was inappropriate, and were laughing hysterically while playing. Not a parent, but some of my students, 7th and 8th grade, asked to add me on Instagram. The worst username I've come across is BootyWarrior13. To be clear, I don't ever add anyone and my account is private. I never give them my handle because I don't want them to find me, but if they do, I decline the follow anyway. Usually the way I find out about their Instagram names is because they'll oftentimes want their peers to follow them, and they'll promote themselves by putting their username or handle on the board. I often joke though that I would add them on Facebook, to which I always get the reply, "Facebook is for old people," so that's fun. When I was 12, my dad found adult Dragon Ball Z content in my search history and proceeded to look through all of the pages while I hid in the bathroom pretending to take a poop. I remember him yelling my name and having to mentally prepare to deny everything. I'm scared to death to have kids and find their adult content searches. My girls are 8 and 10, and so far we've seen sucking boobies and Scooby-Doo sex. It's great. Parenting is great. Send help. Not my kid, but on Halloween I saw a post on my 17-year-old cousin's Snapchat that was a selfie caption verbatim, "Any girls trying to come over here and suck on this spooky thing and get festive with some pumpkin spice lattes?" I immediately facepalmed, then laughed my butt off for a solid 15 minutes. A friend from work's son goes to a fairly strict Catholic school. One day, I was walking out to my car and she was outside yelling on the phone and generally freaking out. I waited around. She usually has a lot of funny drama going on. She hangs up the phone, looks at me, starts hyperventilating, and then laughs hysterically. I was like, "Girl, what is going on?" She said her son's principal called her and her husband and that they need to come to the school immediately, that her son will fill her in on the rest. She continues to tell me that her son got caught looking at naked ladies on the internet, and the principal printed out his search history. He searched booby prawn and lady parts during class. She was yelling at her husband on the phone, telling him about the situation, and all he had to say was, "We should have taught him how to delete the history." I mean, the husband has the kid's best interests at heart, let's be honest here. When I was a little girl, I wanted to play some Barbie games or look at girl stuff, so I went to girls.com. Went downstairs to my mom crying in order to rat myself out. My little sister had something similar happen. She wanted to look at new bikes in order to decide what to ask Santa for. She went to dicks.com, hoping to see Dick's Sporting Goods. Instead, she saw a lot of schlong. Guess it runs in the family. Funny thing is, dicks.com actually takes you to Dick's Sporting Goods homepage now. Oh dear God. Reading this makes me realize how much my parents probably saw in my search history before I knew about incognito mode. Okay, it should be my parents telling this story, but here goes. So when I was a youngin' and just exploring the internet, I would usually go on Disney Channel to play games, but I wanted to find sites with fun girly stuff on them. So of course I just went to girls.com. Well, that took me right to an adult site, and my little self was like, "Whoops," and closed it right away. Well, apparently my dad had been looking at the browser history and noticed. So my dad's interrogating my two older brothers, asking them who was looking at adult content. And of course they said it wasn't them. My dad was persistent with trying to get them to confess until I come down the stairs and confessed that it was me. My brothers had the biggest sigh of relief. You're a good sister. I know many a sister would have counted that as a double win. Number 1 for not getting caught, and number 2 for getting your brothers in trouble. I found out my son is an urban explorer. He's 14 and I saw some of the videos of him and his friends sneaking into an old Air Force base and climbing on top of an air hangar. Yeah, just make sure he doesn't do anything really dangerous. One of my buddies was an urban explorer and I honestly don't know how he's not dead. He's climbed the top of spherical shaped buildings, hopped on fast moving trains and other crazy stuff. This is another trend that I just find incredibly dangerous and stupid. Guys, please don't do stuff like this. It's not worth it just for some views. I was trying to figure out my niece's age, but it was too late to call my mom and ask. I remembered she had an Instagram account and I thought that might help me figure out how old she is. I looked her up. She has the standard tween Insta bio about what activities she likes and a list of 15 of her BFFs. Immediately followed by pondering, and I quote, "Mostly, why do people hate me?" She's 12. She's definitely 12. In my 9-year-old son's Google history, I found, "Do girls in England poo blood for a month? Do you live in England? Because it's weirder if you don't." My 15-year-old dropping acid on Snapchat. So, not just bad choices, but we're raising a kid stupid enough that not only created video evidence, which was beyond dumb, but to keep it under my story. I checked my 11-year-old son's search history to find a number of interesting questions. Do men grow vaginas? Will my penis disappear when I'm 18? Will I become a girl? How do I save my penis? I asked him about his search history a couple days later, and he told me that some kids in school told him that when boys turn 18, they turn into girls and lose their penis. Those bastards. I hopped on my nephew's tablet and proceeded to pull up the internet browser. Immediately, I was staring at a screenshot of an overweight, homeless-looking Santa knocking the cornhole out of a much younger Mrs. Claus. I immediately asked my nephew what kind of research he was doing with this Santa video, and his face turned fire engine red and he scurried back to his room. I'm sure he at least appreciates your discretion. This is kinda close. So I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. They both love to watch kids' YouTube. Mostly these annoying toy unwrapping videos. I don't know. Anyhow, the other day I was working on my computer and they were playing Play-Doh. My 2-year-old comes into the room and tells my wife, while I'm listening, "Mommy, I made this." My wife, "Oh, that's awesome." 2-year-old, "Do you like it? Let me know in the comments." My wife and I died. I think this might kind of say something about what we're exposing our kids to in this day and age, but we're not going to get into that right now. I recently discovered my 10-year-old son had been looking for inappropriate content, but his computer has parental controls, so he was trying to look it up on his Roblox game. My daughter was 6 at the time. She was supposed to be asleep, and I go up to charge her Kindle and can't find it. I go to her room and quietly sneak in. I find her watching a video under a blanket. It's a popular mechanics video about how to build your own windmill. She had a mock model in the corner of the room she was working on. I definitely wasn't expecting that. This is definitely our most wholesome one so far. She's just enthusiastic about her project. My kids are too young for Twitter or Snapchat, but they love to watch YouTube. I started getting notifications a few months ago from people replying to my comments on conspiracy videos. I found out my son has a curiosity about flat earthers and doomsday preppers. That's kind of the scary side of everything. The kid doesn't know any better, he's just watching a video. And once you watch one, YouTube just starts to recommend more and more. They don't understand that the videos they're watching are conspiracy videos, and that the information in them might be less than accurate. When my son was 8, my wife was looking at his tablet and saw his comments on YouTube videos. Quite a few comments along the lines of, "You don't know what you're talking about, you," and then a series of randomly strung together cuss words that normally wouldn't be used together. He'd get called out by others for the random cussing and he'd say, "I'm only 8, I can do what I want," followed by random string of cuss words. When we brought it up, he knew they were bad words, but was repeating other vulgar comments he saw from other comment trolls, and didn't fully understand the harshness of his words. Now his YouTube habits are monitored much more closely, and he hasn't done anything like that since. Hopefully you got on top of that one early enough that he's not going to turn into another kid telling me how he's going to screw my girlfriend on Fortnite. My daughters are grown up now, but when one of them was around 14 or 15, I opened up her MySpace page. She was telling all these kids that her mother, that would be me, was a raging alcoholic. She was telling them how I was neglectful and how I didn't like her. At the time, I was pregnant with twins, working full-time, and my husband was gone with the Marines a lot. I'm not a drinker at all. Obviously, we had a long talk. She was feeling left out with all the excitement over the babies. Still though, it was pretty hurtful. It took me a long time to get over that. I wouldn't take that one too personally. Your daughter was just looking for some attention. It's honestly kind of understandable. My younger brother thought that when you entered more searches, it would delete the ones before at some point. So I look on his iPad one day and see a search for boobs or something like that. The search after that was cheese, then cheese, and then cheese, and so on. So many cheeses. Wouldn't you have to start at the top where it was just a whole bunch of cheeses and then see it be less and less cheeses as you go down? So you'd be scrolling down through all of the cheeses and then get to the bottom and see boobs and be like, I see what he was trying to do. My significant other was looking something up on YouTube at her sister's place, and the search bar autofill defaulted to sexy girls with nipples you can see through their tops, but spelt horribly. My significant other's niece is 6. Needless to say, her parents were mortified and doubled down on the parental controls. When Twitter became popular, my son was about 5 or 6 years old. He came up with a way to tweet vocally. Throughout the day, he would say things like, "Going to play with my trains, tweet tweet," and "bacon for breakfast, tweet tweet." I was sad when he stopped doing it. When I was 11, my mom asked me one day about some Google searches on the family computer, including sexy Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. I blamed it on the babysitter and somehow convinced my brother to back me up. A couple years later, I was caught searching, "Can I see a picture of a girl in a bikini?" But I wasn't able to blame it on anyone this time around. I've since discovered the incognito tab. I think the incognito tab might be the secret hero behind this entire Reddit thread. My stepson is 7. I found a bunch of searches for Dominicans with no hands and feet, Dominicans with no heads, Dominican chests, Dominican torsos, Dominican legs, Dominicans in stores, Dominicans for sale, silver Dominicans, black Dominicans, white Dominicans. I was at a loss of how to bring it up to him. Thankfully, the next day we were in a clothing store and he asked me why Dominicans don't have hands or heads. Then why are there so many different colored Dominicans? I remembered the internet searches and became a little upset. I told him to be quiet because what he was saying could be taken offensively by Dominican people. He then got frustrated and loudly said, "Dominicans aren't people," as he pointed to a statue next to us. I breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Mannequins." I'm sure you still got a few looks in that store though. Not my kid, but my nephew. He was diligent upon receiving his phone to get Facebook installed along with an account. Last year, Halloween, I walked by him on his phone and glanced at a video of an explosion. Turns out, he liked a page of people blowing crap up. Not just any crap, but the actual crap that comes out of people. When confronted, he said he was shown the page from a friend who uploads videos there. You know, typically I would say your kid's gonna be friends with who he's gonna be friends with, but I think this is definitely one of those cases where you need to intervene. My son has autism, high functioning but still autistic. He's been mainstream for most of his schooling, and in 5th grade, one of the boys told the others how to search vagina and boobs on the computer. Well, my son in all of his autism glory was searching pugina, not vagina, and was only getting pictures of leaves. Poor kid. This was probably the early 2000s. Me and my buddy were off school for the summer and he would come hang out at my house. Occasionally, we'd look at adult content on the family computer. One day, my dad comes home from work and comes downstairs and says, "Hey, you guys missed the bus." I'm like, it's summer. There's no school. My dad responds, "The bang bus." Mother of God, we forgot to close the browser. I found a search for weight loss on my then 12-year-old search. Bothered the heck out of me as I've always tried to instill good body image, and she's by no means overweight. She was going through the baby fat stage. Started having conversations about the importance of being healthy and exercising, but to be comfortable with the body we have. She's since stretched out, but man, I looked for signs of starving and bulimia. Her mother was a bulimic, and I didn't want her to repeat that. We got my young daughter a tablet last Christmas. A couple days later, I went to look something up, and the search bar history had one entry. Is Santa Claus real? Well, that one kinda backfired, didn't it?
What are your dating regrets? Getting so caught up in the fun early stages of the relationship and planning activities for dates that I forgot to just relax and be myself. Take it a week at a time and see how things went. Pretty sure it made me seem too pushy, so things didn't end very well for me. Lesson learned. Chill the F out. The holy trinity of bad dating. 1. Not listening when they told me they weren't interested. 2. Not listening when they told me they were crazy. 3. Not listening to myself when I realized I didn't want to be with someone anymore. This is the first time I've ever spelled it out for myself like this, and I think I'm seeing a pattern.
That I admittedly hid some of my hobbies and interests because I was scared they looked dorky. As soon as I stopped hiding it, I met my partner.
Don't be afraid to show your hobbies or your interests to your girlfriend, boyfriend, significant other, whatever. Just, you know, if they like you for who you are. And if they don't like you because of something as silly as a hobby or an interest that you have, then they don't really like you. Not taking chances with various girls and women throughout my life when I had the opportunities to. And I didn't try to date more in my early 20s. And now I'm in my mid-30s with a combined relationship experience of a little over a year. I basically have the romantic intelligence of a 16-year-old.
Shooting more shots and being way more confident in my 20s. I was a very good-looking guy with very low self-esteem. Funny to look back at now I'm 46.
So far, my biggest regret was moving halfway across the country with someone, and when I was struggling to adjust to that location, they refused to move a few hours for me to a different location. That really hurt. Felt like I gave up so much for them, and it turns out they wouldn't do the same for me. I'll never move for love again. Another thing about this relationship, and a warning to others, is that if a person says they hadn't spent enough time being single before y'all got together, just break it off so they can do their thing. While it might be hard to give up on something good, the feeling of regret for not getting to experience more opportunities and meet more people will constantly be in the back of their head. I could go on, but the point is to have clear communication. That also means that if someone tells you something, actually listen to what they're saying and don't just hear what you want to hear. I always used to say, always give them at least one date to make their case, and you can decide after if you want to continue. Some people are so obviously a walking red or black flag of personality issues that even a single afternoon will be too much time to waste. Just decline and move on. 2. Don't stay with someone because of how they used to make you feel or because you owe them for something they did a long time ago. Staying in a dying relationship doesn't make breaking up later any better and doesn't make you happy now. Also, not my personal mess up, but marriage and or kids won't fix a weak relationship. If it's dying and nobody really cares, get it over with and move on. Number 3. Not mine, but I've seen it firsthand enough. Some people have issues, and while these aren't deal breakers themselves, you shouldn't enter into a dating relationship for the purpose to be free of therapy or to fix them/date people that will fix you. People need to be in a place where they are able to date others, not go looking for someone to fix them or prey on broken people. And if you are with someone that becomes too much baggage, you can stay to help, you can leave if it gets above your pay grade, but you have to make sure you are taken care of too. I give this a 7 out of 10. Solid advice. The fact that I'm not very good at it. Giving my best to the wrong person. Letting them get away with bad behaviors. Being overly romantic and giving to someone who doesn't do the same. Overly apologizing even when I didn't do anything inherently wrong. Begging someone to stay. I screwed over someone who truly loved me. Pushed her away when it was my time to step up. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. She was such a catch. Married now. I should have been more open about my feelings with those I was interested in back around high school and early adulthood because I'm pretty sure a few may have been interested in me, but things just never got started. I should have cut communication once I found out she had been cheating on me since the start of our relationship, instead of doing some on-again, off-again bullcrap for a decade or so. You know, as someone who's personally witnessed very many on-again, off-again relationships, they are one of the most frustrating things to bear witness to, especially when your friend goes from top of the world to as low as can possibly be in such a short amount of time. And now, I'm not saying that people can't make mistakes in relationships, get back together, and then, actually learn from that mistake and be better, but, you need to have a certain degree of self-awareness and recognize what the actual issues are. Like, if you're sat at home, you're like, damn, I want to get back with my girl, or damn, I want to get back with my man. Just have a freaking anime character arc for at least 5 months or something. Think about what the actual issues were. Think about yourself. Think about them. Judge whether or not it's worth it. Let that anime character arc really set in, Despite many warnings from people trying to help me, I put all my eggs in the same basket. Married young and devoted myself to someone thinking that devotion would always be reciprocated. But apparently people change even if you don't. Always be prepared for the other shoe to drop, I guess is my advice. Kinda cynical, I know, but recent experiences taught me a lesson I never wanted to learn. Went on a really great date recently. We really hit it off. We were at this bar until closing, just talking. He wanted to come back to mine, and I thought, hey, he seems really sweet, and we are having a lot of fun together. Why not? He stays up for hours talking and laughing, and we wind up doing it. We continued talking even after that, and we were up until 6 a.m. The next day, I wrote, hey, had a great time, I'd be happy to see you again. And he said he also had a great time and how fun I was, but he didn't want to date because he didn't feel it. I was sad, but you can't help it. I asked if he wanted to be friends, and days go by, he ends up just reading the message, no response. I know it's a stereotype for men to do this kind of thing, but I actually have never experienced this before. I've only had guys be really upfront and honest, or I could tell they were just trying to get in my pants. So now I'm left embarrassed and feel slightly used, so I regret that. Dating someone who always wanted things their way, my life scheduled around what they wanted to do, thinking they would change and it would balance out in time. They were selfish and self-centered. That was the core issue, not a scheduling one. I wish I would never have been exposed to this hookup culture, being made to believe that once I was of legal drinking age that I need to go and have one-night stands, etc. I'm so numb inside that I just continued to date and I don't know how to attach. I'm pretty convinced at this point I wouldn't know love if it slapped me in the face. Well, that is, geez. That made me kind of sad. I had not one, not two, but 3 girls I had huge crushes on out their feelings for me on the last day of high school before moving on to college elsewhere, essentially saying, you should have asked me out. Never could pick up on signals. Ended up meeting my wife and mother of my 3 kids almost 15 years now on a dating app after college, so it all worked out for the better. That I should have jumped at the chance with my current girlfriend 6 years ago. We went to the movies as friends and I really liked her. She casually asked me if I actually wanted to date her. I said that she was a catch, but I was too old for her. I really didn't want to be the creepy older guy, so we are now together 6 years later because I at least had enough social skills not to mess up the friendship in the meantime. Dating someone I liked the idea of but not being into them. She was a professional, a grown adult who could communicate her desires. She was enthusiastic about sex and very much enjoyed one another's company. We would have been fantastic friends with benefits. I just wasn't that into her and she was into me. I knew it, but rather than being fair to her and ending it on transitioning to a friends with benefits situation, I kept it going. Eventually, she dumped me because she was jealous of my female friends. Nothing was going on, but she recognized that they were harming her mental health and didn't want to put up with seeing photos of me hanging out with them. I don't regret anything because I believe you make the choices right for you at the time based on the information you are presented with. Dating her taught me that it's not fair to treat people like that, and I was voluntarily single for 5 years, rather than date people I was only casually interested in. I learned a lot from her, so no regrets, but I do wish I had ended it better. Being too afraid to look like a fool. Only dated superficially, so dated lots of women I didn't actually have things in common with. Invented a single me and a boyfriend me. Do not do this. Always ended up being a boy toy and not a boyfriend and not speaking up about it. My biggest dating regret is expecting the character of my dating options to be better than my own level of personal development. I guess this person means that they always expected the person they were dating to be more mature or just know better than them. I'm not quite sure what they mean. I feel like I've got an inkling of what they are talking about, but I'm not quite there. Chasing. As a woman, pursuing men always felt wrong, but sadly, I've always had to do it because I'm painfully average and invisible. I could stand in front of a beige wall and you'd only see a beige wall. It leads to nothing great anyway. I always end up with someone who's desperately in love with, you guessed it, a very beautiful woman I will never be like. I am someone you pick only if you've made peace with the fact that the one you want will never be yours, so you've decided to settle for less. Dating is absolutely crap for me. If I knew that I'd have to do all the chasing and all the work and all the pathetic attempts to be the best version of myself, which still isn't good enough, I'd have never dated a man. Being alone and asexual isn't all that bad. Okay, you I feel very bad for because it sounds like your confidence has been utterly crushed, and I don't believe anyone deserves to feel that way, especially about their physical appearance, which you just can't help. I had several relationships with very insecure and unstable people with a lot of mental illnesses, and I can say out of all of the crap that I lived through so far, these relationships were the absolute worst part of it. I was always just too open-minded and tolerant, especially knowing how hard life can be with aforementioned issues, and didn't want to close the door to the potential person of my life. But after my last disaster of a partner, I don't even have enough trust in other people left to consider a relationship with them. I slightly regret hamming it up so much in the video earlier on because, damn, this is getting kind of dire and sad. I tried dating 2 girls once. I couldn't handle splitting my emotions, so I dumped one and committed to the other. That girl dumped me, and the other girl wouldn't date me again. Comedy. Oh, also I remember bringing girls to my room when I was younger, them laying in my bed with me and me not doing anything because I was just a little too respectful. Didn't end up with the vast majority of them. One even bluntly commented on how I should have made moves. Cringe, man. I matched with this girl on Tinder a few years back. In our conversation, she told me she was on a temporary visit in the country and that she's staying at a hotel. We agreed we'd meet outside the hotel and go for a drink of coffee at a nearby Starbucks. When I reached the front of the hotel, she didn't exactly walk out of the hotel, but in fact, someone had dropped her at the hotel. That was the first red flag. As I greet her and introduce myself, I suggest we walk for a bit and make our way to Starbucks, but she was adamant of a nearby cafe that she's pointed out across the street, and I was like, okay, sure, why not? The rest of the day was comprised of just getting to know her and what she's doing here on a visit, and while this was happening, she proceeded to order wine numerous times and kept walking back and forth to the restroom. Second red flag. And by the end of our 2-hour-long date, the bill came, and I presume it was going to be at least a 100+ billing, but to my shock, it ended up costing me $560 plus, and I reluctantly paid for it as it is customary where I'm from that guys pay the bill if you're the one who invited the person to the date. And when the bill was paid, she wanted to go clubbing, and I told her, sure, let's meet tomorrow night and go, but I just ended up blocking her and deleting her contact info. I found out later that this is a common scam that happens in my country, and apparently the cafe and her are both in cahoots. She drags in the victims, and the cafe artificially inflates the prices of their menu to overcharge me. The worst part? This was the first date I ever went on, and it took a lot of courage for me to put myself out there, and after that date, it frickin' broke me, and I felt so violated that I haven't gone on a date since. Not dating in my 20s, for one. My early life was something of a sob story because of a butthole doctor in my teens. I had a serious, life-threatening illness when I was a teenager, but we caught it in time and treated it. But this doctor told my mom point-blank right in front of me, "You realize he's going to die from this, right? This kid won't live to see 30. This will probably come back and we won't be able to treat it." Mom fired him from my case after that and a few horrible missteps of bedside manner. I'm 44, by the way, and fine. It never came back, but it screwed me up for years. I lived my late teens and 20s like I was gonna die soon. I didn't invest anything in my life. I lived it up. I partied. I screwed around a lot. Why would I bother getting into a relationship if I was going to die? I mean, sure, I dated a couple times, but nothing more than a couple months, and the problem was, I got so used to being alone and self-sufficient that when I got into my 30s, I tried to date more, but lacked a lot of relationship skills and just really struggled being a part of a couple. Being a partner. Cheating. Don't do it, kids. It's not worth it. I've loved 4 women in my life and not a single one of them would look my way, and knowing it's my fault makes it 100 times worse. I'm sorry, Amanda. Not researching the guy first. There was a guy I went on a few dates with last year. Really liked him. He ended up dating someone else. A few nights ago, I decided to find out his last name because he never told me. When I found out his last name and looked him up online, I found articles about how he sexually assaulted a 7-year-old girl he was babysitting. The dude only served 4 months. I dodged an absolute missile. God damn it, where are the Gary Plochets of the world when you need them? I'm 22 and I have yet to date anyone, so I guess my biggest regret in dating would be not having dated anyone. I suffered something I've always called the weirdness, which is me bottling things up and ending up in major anxious episodes which have destroyed relationships and made some very difficult. It also created either an over-attachment or rejection of people. My style is anxious preoccupied attachment, and it's the first time in 46 years I've been able to give the weirdness a proper name. I regret not hooking up with women before meeting my boyfriend. I feel like he's the one, got me, so I will never know what it's like to sleep with a woman, and it does make me sad sometimes. I also feel like a threesome would ruin our relationship, so that's out of the question. You know, that's absolutely wonderful. I'm really happy that you think this guy is the one, and good luck running away from your gay thoughts. Taking back my ex after she cheated. Don't ever do that. It'll never be the same. So many, either not understanding that they're not interested or worse, not understanding that they are interested. I could have lost my virginity years before if my teenage brain wasn't immune to logic and not so subtle hints. On the other hand, I'm beginning to be a believer of the theory that somehow my life is how it should be. If I had gotten together with that sexy girl that threw herself at me when my friend wanted to leave, I probably would have been a father at 19, which never in my life looked or looks as a good idea. I have too many. One is simply that I took too long to start doing it and then wasn't very good at it and struggled with it for years. I didn't date in high school or even try, and then in college I found myself getting a little older and having none of the experience that most of my peers seem to have. I eventually ended up in a relationship with an older, 30-ish woman with kids. I want to be clear, I don't think that relationship was in any way exploitive, but it just wasn't right for me in the long run, and I never had the experience of having a normal college girlfriend. Maybe it was out of reach for me. I don't know. After that, there were a lot of dry spells. Not just sex-wise, in terms of dating. It eventually worked out and I'm married, but I just wish the road there was easier. I don't know why I needed to go through so many rough, lonely patches. There is a particular situation that haunts me though. I had a date that went well. We were both in our mid-20s. To set the stage here, a lunch/coffee date turned into, hey, let's walk around for a while, which turned into going to an art museum, which eventually turned into getting dinner because we'd spent a lot of the day together. We seemed to have a good vibe and I thought things were going really well. Unfortunately, because of what you can infer from my first paragraph about my own timidity with dating, I eventually sought out a lot of advice, mostly on the internet, that turned out to be not great. I had been used to asking girls if they wanted me to kiss them at the end of a date, but I'd gotten the feedback that a lot of women would find that to be too timid compared to just going for it, and therefore a turnoff, that it seemed too weak. So I finally reasoned, hey, this is going well, as we went to the train and departed. I leaned in and kissed her. After I pulled back, I realized she was mortified. We walked away, but since our respective trains were not showing up yet, I decided to walk back to her and ask if she was okay. She explained that while she was okay, she was incredibly embarrassed because she had never been kissed before. I felt horrible. The train station was hardly the best setting for someone's first kiss, but also I hadn't realized she was so nervous about it and may not have wanted to do it that quickly. We talked a bit afterwards, but our messaging eventually petered out. A lot of friends, including women, told me that while yes, I probably should have asked, I shouldn't feel too bad about it, and that it was probably just her embarrassment, that it may have even been a relief for her in the long run that she got it over with. But I still feel horrible and still wish sometimes I could find her again and apologize. Asking a 22-year-old who looked like Nicole Kidman if I could use her back door. The next day she slapped me and never spoke to me again. Oh my. Trying to be the cool GF. As a teenage girl in the dating world, people see setting boundaries as the crazy GF who doesn't let their partner do anything. So I wanted to refrain from that as far as possible because I was 15 going on 16 trying to impress this 18-year-old. Boy, was I wrong. We needed those boundaries. I let him walk all over me so much for the first 6 months of our relationship that setting up boundaries in later time was a lot harder and frustrating for both of us. I'm now 17 turning 18, and even though it's only been 2 years, I'm really happy with my progression and sense of awareness. So many signals I didn't respond to because I thought, what if I'm wrong? 1. Persevering too long with someone who wasn't good to me because even though he treated me terribly, we could have so much fun together. 2. Then having learned my lesson, persevering too long with someone who was good to me because even though we never had much fun together, he treated me well. Finally, I realized that I had overcorrected and I met my husband who both treats me well and who I can have fun with. Plenty of other guys in there too, but I don't regret any of them. I regret taking my early dating life so seriously. We all know we're not marrying our high school partners. I should have prioritized my enjoyment of fleeting opportunities when they presented themselves because 40-year-old me isn't getting the chance to make out with Amanda Davino under the bleachers at the Friday night football game ever again. My regrets were that I struggled with social anxiety and depression during my prime years, so I forfeited much of the fun, i.e. dating, sex, relationships, that I likely would have otherwise had if I were not so marginalized by those issues. My late teens and all through my 20s and 30s were a dull blur. Kids, it's important you don't waste your life. And I don't mean do dangerous, stupid things. You should still think about what you're doing, but for the love of God, don't waste your life. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.